When I opened my eyes again, I did not go to the Chancellor's residence to acknowledge my birth family. I did not go looking for the husband I had married in my previous life, either. In that previous life I died in a fire. Flames slipped through the cracks in the window and caught the dried mugwort stacked in the corner. Smoke sank low through the room. I stayed close to the floor, pressing a bloodstained sleeve over my nose and mouth, but the acrid smell from my burns still reached me. My husband Chen Linchuan stood outside the door. An iron chain had been wrapped around it from the outside, yet his voice remained as gentle as ever. Jue, as long as accept the charge of secretly producing inferior medicine and stealing the Lin family's prescriptions, I will make sure the two elders of the Shen family remain safe. I used the last of my strength to crawl toward the door. My fingers had been burned dark. Those medicines were taken from the government warehouse by your people. Silence fell outside for a moment. Then Chen Linchuan said quietly, "The Gu family and the Chen family cannot fall." I laughed. I had spent 7 years managing the Gu family's businesses and 5 years helping Chen Linchuan rise through the official ranks. In the end, all I received was one sentence: they could not be allowed to fall, so I was the one who had to fall instead. When the burning roof beam finally gave way, the last thing I thought of was not the vermilion gate of the Chancellor's residence. It was not the sight of Chen Linchuan lifting my bridal veil on our wedding night. I thought of the narrow, shabby little apothecary in Qinghe County. My adoptive father would squat by the doorway slicing medicinal herbs. My adoptive mother would scold me for sleeping late while secretly tucking a hot flatbread into my arms. When I was 16, the Chancellor's residence sent a carriage to fetch me. I thought I had finally found my real home, so I climbed into that carriage without looking back. Only later did I understand that the carriage had not come to take me home. It had come to carry me toward my grave. Jue! Jue! A familiar voice broke through the smoke like a shaft of light. I opened my eyes sharply. There was no fire, no chain, no collapsed beam. Above me was the old wooden bed that had stood in the back room of our apothecary for more than 10 years. A red cord braided by my adoptive mother was tied to the corner of the bed curtain. Outside came the sounds of horses and a servant speaking loudly in the front hall. The Chancellor and Madam have thought of the young lady all these years. Now that the old matter has finally been investigated, my master has specially ordered this old servant to escort the young lady home. I lay frozen on the bed, my chest rising and falling hard. It felt as though the smoke from my previous life were still caught in my throat. The door opened. My adoptive mother, Madame Su, hurried in with reddened eyes. In her arms was a brand new lotus root pink dress. "Why are you still lying down? The people from the Chancellor's residence have already waited about an hour." She placed the dress beside me, then turned away to wipe her eyes. "Hurry and change. Those important people from the capital have endless rules. Don't give them a reason to criticize you." I stared at her temples. There was not yet a single white strand there. For a moment I did not dare blink. 3 years after I returned to the Chancellor's residence in my previous life, the Chen family drove my adoptive father's apothecary out of business. He later broke his leg while gathering herbs in the mountains. My adoptive mother went to the rear gate of the Chancellor's residence to beg me for help and knelt there for an entire night. When the news reached me, Madame Zhou was arranging Gu Mingju's birthday banquet. She had held my hand and advised me gently, "Jiwei, you are now the legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household. You cannot keep lowering yourself for poor relatives from some little town. Think of the family's dignity." I had not gone out to see my adoptive mother. I had been afraid the Gu family would dislike me, and afraid Dinchuan would think I did not understand the greater good. My adoptive mother left the capital the next day. I never saw her again before I died, but now she was alive in front of me. Her palms were rough, her cuffs dusted with medicinal powder, and she was still chattering about how I should avoid arguing with people after I reached the capital. I threw myself into her arms. Madame Su staggered back 2 steps. "What happened?" I buried my face against her shoulder. Tears slid down without a sound. "Mother." That single word made my throat ache. She stiffened, then patted my back softly. "Silly girl. Finding your birth parents is a good thing. The Chancellor's household is such a grand family. You'll have more blessings than you can use." "I'm not going." Her hand stopped. "What did you say?" I released her and wiped my tears away. "I said I'm not going to the Chancellor's residence." Madame Su stared at me for a long time, then touched my forehead. "You don't have a fever. I'm perfectly clear-headed." A voice called impatiently from the front hall again. "Is Miss Shen ready?" "Madam is still waiting for the young lady to return so the family can finally be reunited." I looked at the new dress by the bed. It was exactly the same as the one from my previous life. Back then, I had changed into it and happily climbed into the carriage after the steward from the Chancellor's residence praised how fine clothes could transform a person. Only after returning to the Gu household did I learn that Gu Mingju had rejected the dress as out of fashion 2 years earlier and had never worn it. On the first day the Chancellor's residents came to meet me, they would not even buy me one new outfit, yet they expected me to be overwhelmed with gratitude. I folded the dress carefully and returned it to Madame Su. Mother, I'll go speak to them. The front hall was crowded. 4 tall horses belonging to the Chancellor's household stood outside the apothecary, and the Gu clan emblem was carved on the carriage. Neighbors had gathered around, whispering enviously that I had risen from an ordinary household into wealth overnight. The man overseeing the visit was Steward Zhao. He was the same man who had escorted me to the capital in my previous life. Wearing a dark brown brocade robe, he sat in the only intact armchair in our apothecary while my adoptive father, Shen Chongqing, stood awkwardly to one side, unsure where even to put his hands. When Steward Zhao saw me, he merely lifted his eyes. The young lady is finally awake. It is getting late. Please board the carriage at once. His words sounded respectful, but he did not even stand. In my previous life, I had not understood what that meant. Only after living in the Chancellor's residence did I learn that a servant meeting a true master would never behave that way. In Steward Zhao's eyes, I was not yet a daughter of the Gu family. I was merely an object the Chancellor's residence needed to bring back. I walked to my adoptive father's side. Father, did they tell you why I must leave today? Shen Chongqing adjusted his sleeves uneasily. Steward Zhao says Madam has missed her daughter terribly and naturally hopes to reunite as soon as possible. The Chancellor's residence has already waited 16 years. Why can it not wait one more day? The faint smile on Steward Zhao's face stiffened. The young lady has lived away from her family for many years and does not understand the rules of a great household. Since the Chancellor and Madam have already confirmed your identity, you should return immediately to acknowledge your ancestors and enter the clan register. I looked at the table. A genealogy register, a jade pendant, and several neatly folded documents lay there. In my previous life, I had not understood what those papers meant. Steward Zhao had told me I only needed to press my fingerprint on them to confirm my identity, so I had done so without hesitation. Only much later had I learned that hidden among those papers was an authorization allowing the Chancellor's residence to manage the Lin family assets that belonged to me. Once I pressed my fingerprint onto it, they could claim that I was too young and inexperienced to manage property, and thereby take control of the 2 medicinal mountains and 7 herb estates my maternal grandfather had left behind. What are those? I asked. Steward Zhao instinctively pressed his palm over the papers. Merely ordinary documents required for the acknowledgement of kinship. If they are ordinary, why can I not read them carefully first? The murmurs outside slowly quieted. Steward Zhao finally rose. Young lady, this old servant came by the Chancellor's order. I would not harm you. You need only leave your fingerprint. The Chancellor will arrange everything else for you. The Chancellor has never raised me for a single day. What exactly does he intend to arrange for me? His expression darkened. Blood is thicker than water. Surely the young lady would not refuse her own birth parents for 2 outsiders who share no blood with you. Shen Chongqing's face went white. I took my adoptive father's trembling hand. That very sentence had destroyed him in my previous life. Believing he had held back my future, he had personally lifted my luggage onto the carriage and pushed the family's last 30 taels of silver into my hands, saying that the capital was expensive and he did not want others to look down on me. Those 30 taels had been half a lifetime of savings for him and Madame Su. I looked straight at Steward Zhao. When I caught a severe chill at 3 months old, my father carried me 40 li along mountain roads to find a doctor. When I fell into the river at 7, my mother jumped into the freezing water to pull me out, and her leg has ached ever since. When I was sick, they watched over me. When there was not enough food, they gave me their portion. I paused. What has the Chancellor's residence ever given me? Steward Zhao had no answer. I pointed to the papers on the table. You ignored me for 16 years, then arrived and immediately demanded my fingerprint. Are you here to recognize a daughter, or to recognize the property under her name? The crowd outside erupted. Steward Zhao's expression changed sharply. Young lady, mind your words. Am I wrong? He drew a breath and lowered his voice. You are young and do not understand what is at stake. The Lin family's estate is enormous. How could an unmarried girl manage it alone? The Chancellor is your birth father. It is only proper that he look after it for you. So there it was. In this life he admitted their intention even earlier than before. I pushed the papers back toward him. Please tell the Chancellor I do not need him to manage anything for me. As for acknowledging the Gu family, I turned and stood beside Shen Chongqing and Madame Su. Sunlight fell across the worn threshold of the apothecary and over my adoptive mother's reddened eyes. My surname is Shen. I am the daughter of the Shen family. Steward Zhao's face went cold. The young lady is acting on impulse today. You may regret it someday. That will be my concern. The Chancellor's residence is no ordinary household. If you refuse the carriage today, it may not be so easy to enter those gates in the future. I looked at the carriage that had carried me toward ruin in my previous life. My heart was completely calm. I will never go back. Steward Zhao studied me for a long moment, then suddenly laughed. Very well. He gathered the genealogy register and the documents from the table, walked to the doorway, and stopped there. If Miss Shen refuses to return to the Chancellor's residence, no one can force her. However, this apothecary has recently fallen behind on quite a few supplier payments. Several medicinal merchants in the county also do business with the Chen family. Without the Chancellor's protection, whether this shop can remain open is another matter. He turned back, tidied his sleeves at a leisurely pace, and left. The carriage disappeared down the street. The spectators gradually dispersed. Shen Chongqing stared at the empty doorway and let out a heavy sigh. Jiwei, did you refuse them because of us? Before I could answer, a dull thud came from the back courtyard as though something had fallen. My father's face changed. Oh no. The young gentleman we brought back from the mountain road yesterday. I followed him quickly to the woodshed in the back courtyard. A young man in black was bracing himself against the doorframe. The injury at his shoulder had reopened, and blood had soaked through the bandage. His face was so pale it looked almost translucent, but his eyes were clear and cold. He looked at my father, then at me. Miss Shen refused the Chancellor's residence rather decisively. I stopped. You heard everything? The walls are thin. His voice was hoarse. I took 2 steps closer. Beneath the faint smell of blood was a trace of agarwood incense, far too expensive for an ordinary traveler. Nothing hung from his waist, but his clothes bore the slight marks of a jade ornament that had clearly been worn there for years. This man was certainly not the ordinary merchant my father believed him to be. I had never met him at this point in my previous life. My rebirth had already changed things. The man in black met my gaze without expression. My name is Peiziu. I did not ask whether the name was real. I merely looked at his injured shoulder. Young Master Pei, if you remain standing, I will have to stitch that wound again. He glanced down at it. Miss Shen will still treat me? I turned to fetch my medicine chest. I will, but I charge a fee. 3 days after Steward Zhao left, the Shen family apothecary supply chain was cut off. All 3 merchants who had supplied us for years came to our door. They would rather pay a small penalty for breaking their contracts than deliver so much as a single licorice root. One of them had known my father for many years. Before leaving, he pulled him aside and whispered, "Old Shen, it isn't that we have no loyalty. The Chen family has already sent word. Anyone who keeps supplying your shop can forget about doing business in the capital." When Shen Chongqing returned inside, his back seemed to have bent another degree. We still had a few common herbs in the cabinets, enough for 7 or 8 days at most. Madame Su sat behind the counter counting our remaining money again and again. If only we hadn't offended the Chancellor's household. She immediately looked at me. I'm not blaming you, Jiwei. I know. I placed a list of herbs on the counter. They are not cutting off our supplies because I offended the Chancellor. They are trying to force me back, so I will press my fingerprint onto those documents. Shen Chongqing rubbed his hands anxiously. But we cannot simply watch the shop close. It will not close. I pushed the list toward him. Father, isn't there a herb gathering team west of town that just returned from Lingnan? He blinked. You mean old Peng's group? Yes, but their shipment got wet on the return journey. Every apothecary refused it. I heard they are preparing to break up the team. In my previous life, the Chen family had eventually bought that entire shipment at an extremely low price. Only the top few baskets were seriously water damaged. Most of the herbs underneath were still usable. The Chen family dried and processed them again, and half a year later, when the floods came, the price rose more than tenfold. Take me to see it. Madame Su frowned. How can damp medicine be used? What if it harms someone? Whether it can be used depends on its actual condition. The ruined warehouse west of town smelled damp and bitter. More than a dozen herb gatherers sat on the ground, all looking defeated. Uncle Peng, who led the group and knew my adoptive father, brought us to the stacked bamboo baskets. It isn't that I want to sell spoiled herbs. We ran into 3 days of heavy rain on the way back. The oilcloth over the load tore. The other shopkeepers only glanced at the top layer and declared everything ruined. I crouched down and picked up a handful of Chinese skullcap from the top basket. Its color had darkened and it smelled damp, but there was no mold at the roots. I had several baskets from the top moved aside. The herbs underneath were in far better condition than expected. Less than 20% of the whole shipment was truly unusable. I'll buy all of it. Everyone in the warehouse stared at me. Even my father was shocked. Uncle Peng clearly thought he had misheard. Girl, this is not a few baskets. The whole shipment should cost at least 120 taels. I can offer 80. I opened one basket of white atractylodes. 20% cannot be used as medicine. Another 30% must be reprocessed. Labor, workspace and losses all cost money. Uncle Peng's expression changed. 80 taels was lower than he had hoped, but it was still twice the 40 taels offered by the larger merchants. But can you produce 80 taels? Our family had only 32 taels in cash. Not today. I'll pay 20 taels as a deposit and the remaining 60 within 10 days. If I cannot pay, the property deed for the Shen family apothecary and rear courtyard will be pledged to you. Shen Chongqing inhaled sharply. No. I turned to him. Father, do you trust me? His lips moved several times. Sweat appeared on his forehead. I knew how heavy the question was. The Shen family apothecary was his life's work. I could not demand that he gamble it away simply because of our bond as father and daughter. You may refuse, I said more gently. If we do not mortgage the property, we can buy 1/3 of the shipment. The risk is smaller, but it will only help us survive the immediate crisis. He stared at the herbs in my hands for a long time. Finally he gritted his teeth. Buy it all. Had Madame Su been there, she probably would have chased both of us around with a broom. Once the mortgage paper was signed, we moved the herbs back to the apothecary in several loads that same day. The back courtyard could not hold everything, so I rented the dyeing workshop next door, which had stood empty for years. Peiju, whose shoulder wound had not yet healed, sat beneath the corridor watching me direct everyone as they sorted the shipment. Miss Shen is bold. Does your shoulder no longer hurt, young Master Pei? It hurts. Then speak less. He gave a faint laugh. I had changed his dressings every day. The wound had been caused by a blade and ran diagonally across his shoulder and upper back. It had come within roughly an inch of the tendons and bone. Fine black residue remained around it, like frizz from a concealed weapon. An ordinary traveling merchant did not suffer injuries like that. I did not ask. He did not explain. We were both waiting for the other to reveal something first. Reprocessing the damp herbs was harder than I had expected. Following the Lin family's medicinal manuscript, I divided the affected herbs into 3 grades, then removed the dampness according to each herb's properties using charcoal heat, sun-drying, or stir-frying with rice. When the first batch of white atractylodes finished processing, it gave off a clean, dry, mellow herbal aroma. Shen Chongqing lifted a slice to his nose, and light gradually returned to his eyes. It worked. The usable quantity was about 5% higher than I had estimated. But having medicine was not enough. We still had to earn 60 taels within 10 days. I divided the first processed batch into samples and personally took them to several clinics in the county. The first 2 refused to let me through the door as soon as they heard that the Shen family had offended the Chen family. At the third, Jiren Hall, the elderly physician actually examined the herbs. The quality is not bad. He set down a slice of white atractylodes and sighed. But the Chen family has already warned us. If I buy from you, my next shipment of fritillaria will never arrive. What if I can supply you with patchouli, white atractylodes, and Chinese skullcap at 70% of the market price? His expression sharpened. How much do you have? 300 jin in the first batch, and I can continue supplying it every month afterward. I placed a contract before him. Every shipment may be inspected before acceptance. If the quality fails the agreed standard, the Shen family will compensate 3 times the price. He studied the contract. Young lady, do you know what triple compensation means? I do. If I am not afraid of doing poor work, I have no reason to be afraid of inspection. Jiren Hall accepted the first batch. Once the news spread, 2 more small clinics quietly came to us. By the 5th day we had received 43 taels in payment. On the morning of the 6th day, a young man in a blue-green scholar's robe entered the apothecary. I was bent over the ledger. The moment I heard his voice, my brush stopped. Shopkeeper, do you have good perilla seed and pinellia? I had heard that voice countless times in my previous life. It had once spoken promises of respect and love as he lifted my bridal veil. It had later spoken just as gently outside a burning storeroom while asking me to take the blame that would destroy me. I raised my head slowly. Chen Lingchuan looked much younger than I remembered. He had not yet put on the official robes that would later symbolize his power. For now he was only a handsome but plainly dressed scholar from a poor family. His clothes faded almost white from repeated washing. He looked at me without the slightest recognition. In this life we were strangers. I rose and walked to the medicine cabinet. For a cough and wheezing? He looked surprised. My mother has been coughing for a long time. Lately she has had difficulty breathing at night. Just as before, his mother was gravely ill at this time. He had sought treatment at clinics throughout the city but could not afford enough medicine. In my previous life, moved by his filial devotion, I had waived the fee and secretly cut half of the old ginseng my father had treasured to give him. Later he passed the imperial examination. After I returned to the Gu family, we met again in the capital. He told me he had never forgotten the girl who had once given him medicine, and I mistook that memory for fate. Now I understood there had never been anything fated about it. I had simply given him everything first, and he had happened to need it. I prepared 7 days of medicine, 1 tael and 8 chen. Chen Linchuan emptied his purse onto the counter. Copper coins and scraps of silver totaled only 1 tael and 2 qian. Shopkeeper, could you allow me some time? I will certainly pay the rest later. Yes. Relief appeared on his face. I took out paper and brush from a drawer. Write an IU. Repayment within 10 days. If overdue, the debt will accrue 1 fen of interest each month. He stared at the paper, clearly surprised by my strictness. It is only 6 chen. Is a written note truly necessary? Young Master Chen and I are neither relatives nor friends. Why would it not be necessary? His brow drew together. A physician should have compassion. My mother is seriously ill. Since you have medicine, why value silver so much? I looked at him. He had always been like this. Whatever he wanted, he could somehow describe as something another person was morally obligated to surrender. Herb gatherers can fall while climbing mountains. The people cutting and processing medicine can injure their hands. Caravans transporting it walk hundreds of li through wind and rain. Their work does not stop having value merely because young Master Chen is a devoted son. I pushed the IOU toward him. There were 2 other customers in the shop. Chen Linchuan could not continue arguing without embarrassing himself. He wrote the note. After checking his name and address, I handed over the medicine. He accepted it but kept looking at me. Miss, you seem to know me. The Chen family is rather well known in Qinghe County, but the way you look at me does not feel like the way one looks at a stranger. My fingers tightened inside my sleeve. After a moment, I said calmly, young Master Chen is mistaken. He did not leave immediately. Just then, porcelain shattered in the rear courtyard. I pushed through the curtain and found Peiju bracing himself against a table. A broken medicine bowl lay at his feet. His face was pale and sweat stood on his forehead. What happened? My hand slipped. I crouched to examine the pieces. The medicine had barely been touched. Did you drink any before your hand slipped? I did. A few mouthfuls. He fell silent. I looked at him. He looked back with an expression almost impressively innocent. I touched the bottom of the broken bowl. It was still warm. The medicine had clearly been brought only moments ago. Are you afraid of bitter medicine? No. Good. I'll decoct another bowl. His eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly. Behind me, Chen Linchuan asked, who is this? Peiju raised his eyes. The 2 men looked at each other across half the apothecary. Chen Linchuan's expression remained polite. Peiju had no intention of answering. I stood. Your medicine is ready, young Master Chen. You may go. Chen Linchuan glanced at Peiju once more before leaving with the medicine. After the curtain fell behind him, Peiju asked, Miss Shen does not like him? That has nothing to do with you. True. He bent to pick up a shard of porcelain. It is only that the way you looked at him just now was rather like looking at someone already dead. The prescription paper in my hand creased slightly. His ability to observe people was sharper than I had expected. I took the shard from him and threw it into the bamboo wastebasket. If young Master Pei keeps moving around, I will double the coptis in your medicine. Miss Shen has already doubled it once. I looked up. He could actually taste the difference. So you broke the bowl deliberately? My hand slipped. I gave him a cold look and went to decoct another dose. That evening, Jiren Hall sent over the second payment. Together with our retail earnings from the past few days, it gave us exactly 60 taels. I personally delivered the money to Uncle Peng and retrieved the property deed. When I returned, Shen Chengqing and Madame Su were waiting at the doorway. Madame Su turned the deed over 3 times before giving me a hard swat on the arm. If you ever gamble the house again, I'll break your legs. Her words were fierce, but her eyes were red. I put the deed into her hands. There will not be a next time. At least, next time I will make sure I have a way out first. That night, I checked the accounts for the newly purchased herbs again. Moonlight shone through the window. At some point, Peiju sat down opposite me. In his hand was the Lin family medicinal manuscript that had once been soaked by water. My expression cooled. Who gave you permission to touch my things? He set it back on the table. My apologies. His mouth apologized, but his face showed little remorse. One finger rested on a page describing a special Lin family method for processing white atractalodes. Miss Shen has never left Qinghai County. Why do you know a secret Lin family technique? I looked at him. And why would an ordinary merchant like young Master Pei recognize a secret Lin family technique? The candle flame trembled. He did not answer, neither did I. Wind rose outside, rustling the paper over the windows. We studied each other across the medicine table. After a moment, Pei Ju pushed the book back toward me. It seems we both have matters that are inconvenient to explain. Then let us both keep quiet. To my surprise, he nodded. Fair. I closed the book and turned away, then heard him speak in a low voice behind me. Several large medicine merchants in town have recently begun buying up patchouli, atractalodes, and Chinese skullcap in large quantities. My steps stopped. Before the flood in my previous life, the Chen family had done exactly the same thing, but this time, they had begun buying half a month earlier. How do you know? Pei Ju leaned back in his chair. I have my methods. I looked out the window. Heavy clouds were gathering at the horizon, swallowing the moon a little at a time. The disaster might come early. The next morning, I went to Qinghai Wharf. At this time of year, the river usually reached only the 7th stone step from the bottom. Now, after only 2 rains, the water had already climbed past the 5th. Several cargo boats from upstream were moored along the bank. The boatmen said the Xinjiang region had suffered continuous downpours and that some mountain roads had already collapsed. The same signs had appeared before the Qinghai embankment broke in my previous life. I stood at the wharf for a long time. Many people had died in that flood. The Gu and Chen families, meanwhile, had earned fortunes by hoarding medicine. At the time, I had only recently married into the Chen family. I had personally organized a disaster year medicine ledger for Chen Linchuan. Hundreds of jin of patchouli and Chinese skullcap that were supposedly being sent to the disaster area had been recorded as water damaged and destroyed during transport. In truth, they had been diverted into private Chen warehouses. I had once confronted Chen Linchuan with the ledger. He told me that was simply how the larger situation worked, and one person could not change it. In this life, I was still only the daughter of a small-town apothecary. I could not change the whole world either. But at least in Qinghai County, I wanted to try. Back at the shop, I placed all our remaining silver on the table. Madame Su stared at the 12 taels, eyelid twitching. What are you planning now? Renting a courtyard? The backyard of the shop isn't enough for you? No. I laid my plan before her. While reprocessing the damp shipment, I had realized that the Shen family did not truly lack herbs. We lacked enough hands to process the herbs. Many women in the county knew how to gather and dry medicinal plants. Some were widows whose husbands had died young. Some had been divorced and sent back to their natal families. Others were so poor they could not even prepare a dowry. The herbs they gathered could only be sold cheaply to middlemen. If we brought them together, taught them consistent sorting and processing standards, then supplied clinics directly, our costs would be about 30% lower than buying through major wholesalers. Madame Su frowned through the entire explanation. Women running around outside and working in a medicine business, who knows what people will say? Can a few cruel remarks from outsiders be worse than not having enough to eat? She said nothing. Madame Su herself had gathered herbs for her birth family when she was young. After marrying my adoptive father, nearly every batch of medicine entering our shop still passed through her hands before sale. Yet outsiders always called only Shen Chongqing the shopkeeper. Mother, you will manage the new workshop. Her head snapped up. Father understands medicine, but he is terrible at managing people. You can tell at a glance who is lazy, who is careful, and who has sticky fingers. Shen Chongqing nodded rapidly beside us. Zhui is right. Madame Su glared at him. You be quiet. Even so, that very afternoon she followed me to inspect an abandoned embroidery workshop in the south of town. The courtyard was small but well ventilated, with a row of bamboo racks suitable for drying herbs. I rented it for 6 months at 2 taels per month. On the first day after our hiring notice went up, only 3 women came. A widow, a divorced woman who had been sent home, and a mute young woman. 7 came on the second day. By the third, more than 20 people stood outside the courtyard. Several men had mixed into the crowd. When they learned I was hiring only women, one burst out laughing. What medicine can women make? Bad luck will cling to it. What if someone dies after taking it? He was a clerk from Feng's pharmacy. The Feng family depended on the Chen family for business and had been among the first to cut off our supplies. I did not argue with him. In 3 days, Weiko Hall will hold a public inspection. If shopkeeper Feng believes our medicine is unusable, he is welcome to examine it personally. The clerk sneered. Do not cry and beg us to buy your rotten stock then. During those 3 days I taught the women only 3 things: how to grade herbs, remove impurities, and cut each material to the correct thickness. They sounded simple, but every step affected potency and waste. The first batch of white peony root was cut unevenly. Madame Su called everyone into the courtyard and held up slices one by one. Too thick and it will not dry through. Too thin and its properties disperse too quickly when boiled. One woman murmured. The owner said close enough would do. Close enough? Madame Su gave a cold laugh. People swallow this medicine. A small mistake can cost a life. If you came here to coast through your work, leave before payday. She scolded them without mercy. That night, however, she quietly asked me, was I too harsh? I smiled and served Madame Su a bowl of soup. Anyone who truly wants to learn a skill will stay. On the day of Weikao Hall's public medicine inspection, the courtyard was packed. Shopkeeper Feng came in person and even brought 2 physicians who were friendly with him. He pointed at the herbs the women had laid out to dry. Who knows whether these women's hands are even clean? I had 3 basins of water carried out. Every worker washed her hands in public, changed into a clean outer smock, and then I hung our daily sanitation record on the courtyard wall. Does Feng's pharmacy keep a daily cleaning record? Shopkeeper Feng's face stiffened. We have been in business for 20 years. Why would we need such showy formalities? Being old does not mean being incapable of mistakes. I had samples of white atractylodes, Chinese skullcap, and white peony root, taken from both Weikao Hall and Feng's pharmacy. Their labels were covered, and 3 physicians examined them blindly. The first round compared color and cutting quality. Weikao Hall won. The second judged aroma. The result did not change. For the third, equal 100 jin quantities of raw herbs were processed and the usable finished yield was weighed. Weikao Hall produced 12 jin more usable medicine than Feng's pharmacy. Murmurs of surprise spread through the crowd. Sweat appeared on shopkeeper Feng's forehead. Who knows whether you bribed these physicians beforehand? I laid the 3 sets of herbs out again. Then shopkeeper Feng may judge them personally. He picked up a piece of white atractylodes. His face grew increasingly unpleasant. He had spent half his life in the medicinal herb trade. He knew good stock from bad. I did not force him to admit defeat. Instead, I hung an account sheet on the wall. These are the actual costs for Weikao Hall's first batch: raw herbs, labor, and processing losses. Our white atractylodes of the same quality sells 20% cheaper than Feng's, not because we are losing money, but because we removed 3 layers of middlemen. Shopkeeper Feng gave a cold laugh. What use is a low price if your supply is unstable? Before I could answer, the elderly physician from Jiren Hall stepped out of the crowd and handed me a contract. Beginning next month, Jiren Hall will purchase 300 jin from Weikao Hall every month. No, make that another 200 jin on top of the original amount. Our first long-term supply contract was settled on the spot. Shopkeeper Feng swept away in anger, but the other clinic representatives who had come to watch did not leave. That afternoon, Weikao Hall signed 2 more supply agreements. When the women received their first wages, the mute young woman stood holding 200 copper coins in her palms. Tears dropped one after another onto the money. She could not speak, so she kept bowing to me. I caught her arms. You earned this yourself. You do not need to thank me. She struggled for a moment, then slowly straightened her back. In that instant, I understood that Weikao Hall had already become more than a business to me. In my previous life, I had desperately wanted to enter the Chancellor's residence, because I believed that only by becoming a daughter of the Gu family would others respect me. But real dignity was never something a surname could bestow. It was something that, once you had built it with your own hands, no one could take away. That night, I stayed at the workshop to calculate our new orders. Halfway through moving the abacus beads, a hand appeared across from me. Peiju picked up another ledger. You underestimated labor costs. Where? You counted only the women's daily wages. You did not include training losses, and you did not reserve anything for days when rain prevents drying. I looked at him. An ordinary merchant understands accounts this well? If one travels for business, one learns a little of everything. He took up a brush and wrote several figures. His handwriting was upright, sharp, and orderly. It looked less like a merchant's hand than that of someone accustomed to official documents. I did not expose him. I simply recalculated everything his way. Our projected profit fell by nearly 30%. If you keep your original prices for a full year, he said, a long spell of rain would leave you operating at a loss. Then we add another clause. I wrote into the contract that if a natural disaster increased processing costs, both sides could renegotiate the price, but any increase could not exceed 10%. Peiju read the line. You would rather earn less than leave yourself free to raise prices? Medicine is not rouge or jewelry. Most merchants would not think this way. Then I will not be that kind of merchant. He was quiet for a moment before sliding the ledger back. What Miss Shen wants to build is probably more than one apothecary. My hand slowed over the abacus. For now I only want to survive. And after that? Candlelight reflected in his eyes. I suddenly remembered my previous life, when everyone had told me that a woman's best future was to return to the Chancellor's household, marry a good husband, and preserve her family's dignity. No one had ever asked me, and after that? I lowered my eyes and wrote 3 characters at the end of the ledger. Wika Hall. After that, I want this place to stay open a little longer. How long? Long enough that when a woman in Qingye County wants to live by her own skill, marriage will not be the only path she can think of. She will be able to think of this place too. Peiju did not laugh. He only looked quietly at the newly made wooden sign hanging on the wall. After a long time he said, "That day will come." I looked at him. His tone was so certain that it sounded almost like a promise. I did not answer. Instead I went to the back courtyard and brought him his medicines. He took the bowl, smelled it once, and his brow tightened almost invisibly. "What did you add today?" "Coptis. It clears heat in the stomach. My injury is in my shoulder. Young Master Pei is suspicious of everything. Naturally you must have plenty of internal heat." He gave me a look, then drank the entire bowl without stopping. His expression stayed calm, though his throat worked twice with visible difficulty. Holding back laughter, I pushed a small dish of honey preserved fruit toward him. Someone who is not afraid of bitterness should not need these. Without changing expression, Peiju took 2 pieces. "I merely do not wish to waste something shopkeeper Shen prepared. 1 is enough." He had already put the second into his mouth. "My injury is serious." I finally laughed. He looked at me, and something like a smile appeared in his eyes as well. At that moment, someone pounded urgently on the courtyard gate. One of the workers ran in through the rain. "Owner, several pharmacies in the north of the city have suddenly begun buying patchouli and atractalodes at high prices. They are already paying 30% more than yesterday." My smile vanished. "How many shops?" "At least 5. People have gone into the countryside too. They say they will buy any amount." Thunder cracked outside, followed immediately by a downpour. I hurried to the eaves. Rain drummed over the medicinal herbs that had not yet been brought inside, and the workers rushed to carry them under cover. Peiju opened an umbrella and stepped beside me. "What are you worried about?" I stared at the black sky. In my previous life this rain had continued for 7 full days. On the morning of the 8th the Qinghe embankment broke. "The river is going to rise." He followed my gaze toward the north of the city. "It is only rain." "It is not only rain." I turned to him. "Peiju, you are not an ordinary merchant." His eyes darkened slightly. "And Miss Shen is not an ordinary apothecary's daughter. You are investigating the Chen family, aren't you?" Rain poured from the edge of the roof like a curtain, cutting us off from the noise in the courtyard. He neither admitted nor denied it. I continued. "The Chen family suddenly buying up medicines that clear heat and dampness is not ordinary business. They know something is going to happen upstream." Peiju stared at me. "And how do you know?" I could not tell him I had seen Qinghe after the flood with my own eyes in another life. I could not tell him I remembered exactly how many lives this rain would take. I checked the river. I also questioned boatmen who came from upstream. I met his gaze. "Is that not enough?" "Not enough to make you this certain. Then you do not have to believe me." I took the umbrella from his hand and stepped into the rain. "But I am going to collect medicine, rent storage and secure clean water. If you truly are investigating the Chen family, you should also inspect the county government's medicinal warehouse." After I had gone several steps, his voice came from behind me. "Shen Jiwei." It was the first time he called me by my full name. I looked back. He stood under the eaves with his shoulder injury not yet healed, his straight posture like a blade still hidden in its sheath. "The county medicinal warehouse completed an inventory only 3 months ago," he said. "On paper, nothing is missing." "Then go see it with your own eyes," I answered. "Can figures on a ledger save people, or can actual medicine save them?" Peiju watched me for a long time. Then he turned, went into the rear courtyard and took down a black cloak from the wall. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To the warehouse." He tied the cloak and paused at the gate. "Do not buy too much of the expensive stock at once." "Why?" "The Chen family can absorb far more inventory than you. If they realize someone is competing with them, they will only drive the price higher." That matched my own concern. "What do you suggest?" "Buy inexpensive substitutes. Spread the purchases across many sources. Do not go through the large merchants in town." His plan was almost exactly what I had intended. I nodded. "We keep each other's actions secret, naturally." He opened the courtyard gate, then turned his head again. "Do not alter the workshop accounts until I return. Come back alive first." The corner of his mouth lifted faintly. Shopkeeper Shen is still thinking about my accounts? You owe 7 days of medical fees, so that is the reason. He disappeared quickly into the rain. I stood holding the umbrella for a moment, then called all the women together. From today, Wikao Hall stops making ordinary fragrance sachets. Divide into 3 teams. 1 team will buy mugwort, patchouli and attractalodes. 1 team will prepare water purification medicinal packets. The last team will recount our entire inventory. Someone asked nervously, "Owner, is something really going to happen?" I looked at the rain growing heavier in the courtyard. Possibly, but if we prepare in advance, we do not have to sit still and wait for disaster to arrive. The rain did not stop that night. Peiju did not return either. Not until daybreak did I hear the agreed knock at the gate, 2 short knocks and 1 long. I opened it. He was soaked through, 1 hand braced against the wall, his face even worse than when his earlier wound had been at its worst. I immediately stepped forward to support him. "Were you injured?" He took a breath and pulled a small oil paper packet from inside his clothes. Inside was a handful of blackened, moldy Chinese skullcap. The high-grade medicine in the government warehouse has all been replaced with inferior stock. I stared at the moldy Chinese skullcap. In my previous life, the government medicine had been moved only after the flood began. This time, everything had happened early. Peiju raised his eyes. Rainwater ran from his jaw. "Shen Jue, you were right." The day after he brought back the moldy skullcap, continuous rain settled over Qinghe County. The county government announced that nothing was wrong with its medicinal warehouse. Officers even posted proclamations along the main streets, claiming that malicious people were spreading flood rumors to disturb medicine prices. Anyone who continued buying herbs in large quantities would be punished for hoarding. The proclamation was pasted on the wall directly opposite Wikao Hall. Madame Su read it and angrily threw down the bamboo tray in her hands. "The medicine merchants are buying everything up and the officials ignore them. Instead they come after us." "They are not trying to regulate us," I said, dividing the purchase list I had prepared among several trusted workers. "They want everyone to have no choice but to buy from the Chen family." Publicly, I stopped buying in bulk. Privately, reliable women went separately into the villages to purchase mugwort, patchouli, attractalodes and plantain herb. These medicines were ordinary and inexpensive. The Chen family did not value them and would not immediately notice. As for Chinese skullcap, forsythia and other herbs whose prices had already been driven up, I bought only small quantities. Peiju left early and returned late every day. His shoulder had not fully healed, yet he seemed incapable of noticing pain. Sometimes he came back late at night with mud on the hem of his black clothes, and the particular musty smell of the county medicinal warehouse clinging to his sleeves. I never asked where he had gone. He never asked where I was hiding the stock. We were like 2 people temporarily sharing one chessboard, each making our own moves while quietly concealing the other's traces. On the afternoon of the 5th day, a green curtained carriage stopped in the alley behind the apothecary. A young woman stepped down wearing a veiled hat, accompanied by only 1 maid. When she entered Wikao Hall, I was inspecting a new shipment of attractalodes. Slender pale fingers lifted the veil, revealing a face I had looked at for more than 10 years in my previous life. Gu Mingju. In that life she had been the cherished legitimate young lady of the Chancellor's household. She excelled in music, chess, calligraphy and painting. She was beautiful, graceful and impeccably mannered. Standing beside her, I had always seemed clumsy and silent, like a stone accidentally placed in a box of jewels. On my first day back at the Gu residence, she personally served me tea with red-rimmed eyes. "Elder sister has suffered outside for so many years. I am willing to return everything to elder sister." I had been deeply moved. Only later did I learn that what Gu Mingju did best was not music or painting. It was making sure everyone saw her grievance. "You are Shen Jiwei?" This was our first meeting in this life. Her gaze traveled from my sleeve to my fingertips, as though assessing merchandise that did not please her. "I am." She handed her veiled hat to the maid and looked around the workshop. The women stopped working and stared curiously at her. Gu Mingju frowned slightly. "I have something to say to you alone." I took her to the rear courtyard. Peiju was sitting under the corridor sorting records from the government medicinal warehouse. When Gu Mingju saw him, her steps paused. She probably had not expected to find someone like him in this rundown apothecary. Even dressed in plain black, the calm authority of someone long accustomed to giving orders was difficult to hide. "Who is he?" "A patient," I said. Peiju added blandly. "A patient who owes medical fees." I looked at him. Gu Mingju did not ask again. She followed me into the small room. As soon as the door closed, she took a thick stack of banknotes from her sleeve and placed them on the table. 5,000 taels. I did not touch them. Is Miss Gu here to buy medicine? I am buying your promise to remain in Qinghe County. She sat straight-backed and spoke as if discussing an ordinary transaction. Do not return to the Chancellor's residence. Do not acknowledge the Gu family. Do not mention your birth again. If you agree, these notes are yours. I looked down at the 5,000 taels. In my previous life after I first entered the Chancellor's household, I had never truly held even 50 taels. Madame Zhou claimed I did not understand how to spend money in the capital and kept all my monthly allowance for me. Gu Mingju, meanwhile, could spend 100 taels on a single hairpin. Now she was willing to offer 5,000 taels to buy my silence. I have already refused the Chancellor's residence. I do not believe you. Her fingertips pressed down on the edge of the notes. If you truly do not want to return, why not take the money? Because my identity is not something you can buy. Too little? My identity is not merchandise. Gu Mingju's mouth curved mockingly. Fine words. If you care so little about status, why keep the Lin family's medicinal book? Why operate an apothecary? The Lin family is my mother's family. The Gu family is also your family. No, I answered too quickly. Something flickered in her eyes. You act so high-minded, but you only want father to come and beg you personally. Gu Mingju. It was the first time I had called her name in this life. You did not come today because you are afraid I will return to the Gu family. Her brows drew together. You came because you are afraid the Gu family will stop wanting you. Her face went white. Nonsense. If the Gu family truly regards you as their daughter, whether I return or not would not affect your position. I pushed the banknotes back. But you do not dare believe that. She sprang to her feet. The chair scraped harshly against the floor. What do you know? I have called them father and mother since childhood. I accompanied grandmother when she worshipped at the temple. I copied books for my elder brother. The entire capital knows I am the legitimate daughter of the Gu family. And then? What if they tell you tomorrow that everything must be returned to the real daughter? What can you do? Her breathing became uneven. I looked at her tightly clenched fingers and suddenly remembered my first return to the Gu household in my previous life. She had stood behind Madame Zhou in exactly this way. Back then, I saw only her silk clothes and jeweled ornaments. I never saw the fear hidden beneath them. But understanding her fear was not the same as forgiving her. The harm she had done to me in my previous life did not disappear merely because she had also been pitiable. I will not return to the Chancellor's residence, I said calmly, but I will not take your money. I will not promise never to mention my birth either. Why? Because I do not owe you an account of my life. Gu Mingju stared at me. Her eyes gradually reddened, but she did not cry. She gathered up the banknotes sharply. You had better remember what you said today. At the door she stopped. Father is arranging a marriage for me. I had no intention of responding, but she turned and gave me an almost provocative smile. The eldest son of the Chen family, Chen Linzhen. My fingertips went cold. In my previous life, the marriage alliance with the Chen family had been intended for the true legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household. Since I would not return in this life, they had pushed Gu Mingju into that place instead. The Chen family was a major medicinal household in the capital, and Chen Linchuan already had scholarly honors. Gu Mingju seemed to be watching my face for disappointment. I heard you prepared medicine for his mother a few days ago. He paid for it. Do you like him? I almost laughed. Miss Gu thinks too much. Good. She turned to leave. Her maid hurried after her but bumped Gu Mingju's arm while crossing the threshold. A sachet embroidered with a gold thread peony fell to the ground. The maid immediately picked it up. Gu Mingju had already walked several steps and did not notice. Miss Gu. The words reached my lips, then stopped. When the sachet fell, a little gray-white medicinal powder had spilled from a seam. I knew that smell too well. In my previous life, Gu Mingju had suffered chronic stomach pain and had remained childless for years after marriage. The Gu household claimed that she had always been frail. Later, while organizing old prescriptions for her, I had smelled the same medicine in the fragrance sachets and beauty tonics she used every day. A small amount would not cause immediate disaster. Long-term exposure, however, could gradually damage her digestion and undermine her fertility. Gu Mingju looked back. What is it? I took the sachet from the maid but did not return it immediately. Who prepared the fragrance inside this for you? Her expression chilled. What business is that of yours? There is medicine in it. Fragrance sachets naturally contain medicinal herbs, not ordinary aromatic medicine. I loosened a small section of the seam and used a silver hairpin to lift out a little powder. Wearing this for a long time will damage your stomach. It can also affect your ability to have children. The maid's face changed. Gu Mingju only gave a cold laugh. A moment ago you claimed you would not compete with me. Now you are trying to turn me against mother? Madame Zhou gave this to you? her eyes sharpened. Who gave you the right to call mother by name? Gu Mingzhu, I do not need you to believe me. I placed the sachet back in her palm. After you return to the capital, find a physician with no connection to the Chancellor's household and have it tested. Have your daily beauty tonic examined too. Her hand closed around the sachet. What exactly do you want? Nothing. I looked directly at her. Saving you once does not mean I forgive you. It only means the person harming you should not be allowed to get the result they want. Gu Mingzhu said nothing. She turned and walked into the rain faster than she had arrived. After her carriage left, Peiju came over from the corridor. She will not believe you immediately. I know. I warned her anyway. Whether she believes it is her choice. I bent and collected a little of the powder left on the ground. Whether I speak is mine. Peiju studied the packet in my hand. What is it? Powdered root from a purple flowering medicinal plant mixed with small amounts of safflower and musk. Vicious. A dose or two would not be fatal, I said as I sealed the powder. But after 10 years? His eyes darkened. Someone in the Chancellor's residence does not want Gu Mingzhu to have children, or does not want her marriage into the Chen family to go smoothly. I looked toward the courtyard. Rain slanted through the air and distant thunder rolled. Gu Mingzhu thought she was fighting to keep the position of legitimate daughter. She did not understand that what the Chancellor's household truly needed was never one daughter or another. It needed a piece that could be placed wherever it was most useful. That night, while examining the paper that had held the spilled powder, I found a small dried petal. It was not from a plant commonly used in the capital. It grew only on one of the Lin family's old medicinal mountains. The Chancellor's household had already begun reaching into the Lin family's property. On the 7th day of rain, the Qinghe River covered even the stone step at the wharf. The county government finally sent men to inspect the embankment. Only a dozen constables went. They carried neither timber stakes nor sandbags. After walking around once, they returned and announced that the embankment was stable, and the people had no reason to panic. Wekao Hall's medicine stock, meanwhile, grew day by day. There were not enough warehouses to rent in the south of the city. Every landlord feared offending the Chen family, and would rather leave a property empty than rent it to the Shen household. I spent 2 days searching before finding an abandoned grain storehouse west of the city. Its roof leaked in 3 places and moss covered the corners, yet the owner demanded 60 taels. This is robbery. Madame Su stood under the leaking eaves, furious enough to turn pale. It used to cost only 10 taels a year. The broker smiled awkwardly. Times are different now. Madame knows whom Miss Shen has offended. Apart from my employer, no one dares rent her a place. I had only 27 taels of cash left. Wekao Hall had to pay wages every day, and several herb shipments still had balances due. I could not produce 60 taels. 20 now, I said. The broker shook his head. The owner said not 1 copper less than 60. Then I will pledge collateral. What else does Miss Shen have to pledge? His gaze moved over my clothing with undisguised ridicule. You already mortgaged your shop and house once. Do you intend to mortgage them again? Before I could answer, a jade pendant landed on the table. The jade was warm and fine, carved with a dark bird spreading its wings. The broker's smile froze. Peiju stood behind me, rain still clinging to his cloak. Is this worth 60 taels? The broker lifted the jade and inspected it. His face changed at once. Certainly, more than enough. I pressed my hand over the pendant. No. Peiju lowered his eyes to me. The storehouse cannot wait. This is yours. It is only being pledged. I do not owe favors without written terms. After a moment of silence, I took out paper and brush and wrote an IOU. 60 taels, repayment within 3 months. Interest calculated at the lowest common private lending rate. Peiju read it and frowned. You are even charging yourself interest? Even brothers settle accounts clearly. We are not brothers. All the more reason to settle them clearly. He looked at me for a while, then signed the name Peiju. I stared at the signature. A false name would be of questionable value if we ever took the paper to court. Still, the fact that he was willing to leave any written trace at all was enough for me not to expose him. Once the grain storehouse was secured, everyone from Wekao Hall moved there. We patched the holes in the roof with oiled cloth, and laid wooden boards and dry straw over the floor to keep the herbs from absorbing dampness. That night the rain sounded as though it might break through the entire city. I led the workers around the storehouse, checking every leak. Just after we moved the last 2 baskets of mugwort, the wind ripped open a section of oilcloth above me. Cold rain poured down. An umbrella covered me almost immediately. Peiju stood behind me with nearly the whole canopy tilted toward my side. His right shoulder remained outside it and was soon soaked. Your wound cannot get wet. It has healed. It was still bleeding when I changed the dressing yesterday. Shopkeeper Shen has a very good memory. I ignored him and tried to push the umbrella back over his shoulder. He did not move it. There are still 3 leaks in the storehouse, he said. I know. You also have not slept properly for 2 days. You know that and still refuse to rest yourself? Young Master Pei still owes medical fees, yet now you are managing the physician? He laughed softly. Shopkeeper Shen's medicine is too expensive. I cannot afford to become ill again. The rain was loud, yet that sentence reached me with startling clarity. I raised my head. Lantern light caught the side of his face. Rain dripped from the ends of his hair, but his eyes were gentler than usual. For one beat, my heart lost its rhythm. Chen Linchuan had once held an umbrella over me in the rain too, but his umbrella always stayed precisely centered between us. He said husband and wife were one body, so everything should be fair. At the time I had not understood that some forms of fairness were merely exact calculations. Sometimes an umbrella tilted toward one person was what it meant to truly keep someone in your heart. Go change your clothes, I said, looking away. If you keep getting wet, the medicine fee doubles. Is that a threat? A notice? Peiju finally shifted the umbrella a little back toward himself. We stood side by side in the leaking grain storehouse and watched the workers move the last baskets of medicine onto high shelves. How is the government warehouse investigation? I asked. The ledgers are false. Can you prove it? I still need the shipping manifests. He paused. Someone moved medicine out of the county before the flood, under the excuse of renovating the warehouse. Every lead points toward DG Trading House, which belongs to the Chen family. I remembered the accounts from my previous life. DG Trading House had looked like one of the Chen family's least important businesses, but it was the one used to transfer government medicine. Liushi Wharf, east of the city. Peiju turned to me. What? DG's shipments do not pass through Qinghe's main wharf. They are afraid of leaving official records. They use the small ferry at Liuxi in the east. Normally only timber travels through there, and no one checks it at night. How do you know? My father once took me there to buy herbs. The excuse was imperfect. Peiju watched me for a long time, but he did not press. I will go tonight. The river is rising too fast. If I wait, the evidence may be gone. I tightened my grip on the umbrella. I will send herb gatherers who know Liushi to guide you. No need. I am not helping you. I need those manifests too. He did not refuse again. That night, Peiju went to Liushi Wharf with 2 of Uncle Peng's nephews. I remained at the grain storehouse and waited until dawn, but he did not return. Instead, Gu Mingju's letter reached me first. The maid who delivered it had changed into a farmer's clothes and came through the back gates soaked by the rain. From inside her coat, she produced an oil paper packet holding half a bowl of dried medicinal residue and several lines in Gu Mingju's own hand. The sachet and beauty tonic are both problematic. I cannot discover who prepares them. If you know how to treat the damage, name your price. It was still Gu Mingju's usual tone. Even frightened, she would not write the word please. I examined the residue carefully. Its composition was similar to the sachet, but the dosage was stronger. If she continued drinking it for another year, some of the damage would become irreversible. I wrote back. Stop using all aromatic medicines and tonics sent by the Chancellor's residence. Find a physician you truly trust and use gentle formulas to strengthen digestion and nourish the blood over time. Then I added one more line. Do not alert the person responsible. The maid tucked the letter away but did not leave. Miss Shen, my young lady asks why you are helping her. I already told her. She does not believe it. I looked at the maid. Tell her I am not treating her because I have forgiven her. I am doing it because she deserves to know who truly wants to harm her. Not long after the maid left, a tremendous sound came from the distance. The ground itself seemed to tremble. Then frantic gongs rang from the north of the city. The embankment has broken. Someone ran through the rain shouting. The upstream embankment has burst. The water is coming down. Everyone in the grain storehouse stopped moving. Madame Sue's face went pale. I stepped outside. At the far end of the street, families were already carrying children and belongings toward higher ground. Through the gray rain in the distance, muddy floodwater looked like a dark wall swallowing fields outside the city. The disaster from my previous life had still come. This time at least, we had medicine. I shut the warehouse doors and turned to everyone. First team, recount the stock. Second team, boil water. Third team, clear the clinic and bring every usable pot and wooden bucket here. The women's faces were white, but not one of them left. I turned to Shen Changqing. Father, go invite the elderly physician from Jiren Hall. Mother, take people and clear the courtyard. We need room for the injured. Madame Su grabbed my wrist. And you? I'm going to the city gate. No. The refugees will look for medicine as soon as they enter the city. I gently freed my wrist. Someone has to tell them that Wekao Hall has medicine and rules. I had barely stepped through the gate when a black horse came racing out of the rain. The rider jumped down and stumbled once on landing. Peju pushed a bundle of soaked papers into my hands. I found the manifests. I looked at the blood seeping through his sleeve. You are hurt. A scrape. You call that a scrape? Read the manifests first. The writing had bled from the rain, but the government seals were still clear. 3,000 jin of high-grade medicinal stock from the county warehouse had been transferred to a private Daiji trading house storehouse a full month earlier, under the stated purpose of protecting it from dampness. Peju caught my wrist. There are at least 1,000 flood victims outside the city. I know. What are you planning to do? I looked toward the grain storehouse packed with medicinal stock, opened the doors. By that afternoon, however, the city gate had been shut. The county magistrate claimed that strange illness might already be spreading among the flood victims, and that, for the safety of the people inside the city, no one was permitted to open the gates without authorization. Cries from outside came through the heavy wooden doors. Elderly people, children, and injured farmers were all left standing in the rain. At the same time, grain shops and medicine shops inside the city closed one after another. In less than half a day, a packet of patchouli that had normally cost 20 copper coins was being resold for 100. When I arrived at the gate with the women of Waikau Hall, the county magistrate was standing on the wall telling the townspeople to go home. Allowing flood victims into the city may bring disease. I have already sent a report to the court. Relief supplies will arrive soon. How soon is soon? I called from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned. The magistrate's face darkened. Shenji, what are you trying to do now? I walked to the foot of the city wall. The people outside have already spent a full day in the rain. If they receive no treatment, some will die from exposure even before any epidemic appears. What do you understand? If we let them in and something happens, who will take responsibility? I will. Can Waikau Hall afford all the patients you intend to accept? It will still be faster than waiting for your excellency to stand on the wall until the situation solves itself. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The magistrate flushed with anger. Guards, take her away. 2 constables had barely started down the steps when Peju appeared behind me. He had changed into clean clothes, and the injury at his shoulder had been freshly bandaged. In his hand was a document bearing the seal of the Court of Judicial Review. The magistrate saw the seal and went pale. A cooperation order from the Court of Judicial Review? Peju's voice was quiet. The accounts concerning the missing government medicine are now under temporary seal for investigation by the court. Whether the city gate opens remains the county government's decision. However, if anyone dies because treatment was delayed, Your Excellency will need to account for every resulting death in your memorial to the court. Sweat appeared on the magistrate's forehead. He did not recognize Peju, but he recognized that seal. Who exactly are you? That is not important for the moment. Peju stepped beside me. What matters is that Miss Shen has medicine, space, and is willing to accept responsibility for the people she takes in. The magistrate still hesitated. I looked up toward the wall. There is no need to bring everyone inside at once. Open the side gate first and admit the elderly, the very young and the injured. The others can shelter on the high ground outside the walls. Waikau Hall will send medicine and clean water out. Everyone entering the city will be registered with their origin, symptoms, and known contacts. Anyone with a high fever will be housed separately. I paused. That way we can save people while reducing the risk of illness spreading. Several physicians in the crowd nodded. Dr. Tang, the elderly physician from Jin Hall, came to stand beside me. Miss Shen's plan is workable. I will bring my clinic's apprentices to help examine patients. Once one physician stepped forward, 2 other clinics followed. The magistrate had no reason left to refuse and ordered the side gate opened. When it moved, the crying outside seemed to pour into the city like another flood. The first group carried in consisted of more than a dozen elderly people and children. Some had broken legs after being struck by timber. Some had skin sores from being soaked in floodwater for too long. Most were simply freezing and hungry. The women of Waikau Hall had already cleared the courtyard. Madame Su stood at the entrance with wooden signs and directed people according to symptoms. Fever to the east courtyard, external injuries to the west. Anyone who only needs medicine and is not staying overnight, register first. Her voice was louder than any constable's. At first, some victims were skeptical, because the people registering them and preparing medicine were women. Then a southern medicinal herb trader tried to steal 2 packets of patchouli in the confusion, and the mute worker caught his wrist before he could leave. After that, no one looked down on them again. I wrote 4 rules and posted them outside the main gate. Severe cases and young children would receive treatment without charge. Ordinary flood victims would pay only cost price for medicine. Those without money could exchange labor clearing streets, carrying herbs, or building shelters for medicine. Every day's incoming stock, outgoing stock, and quantities distributed would be publicly recorded. Someone asked why everything could not simply be given away. I pointed toward the grain storehouse. Our medicine is limited, and no one knows how long the disaster will last. If we give away everything today, what will we give the people who arrive tomorrow? The man lowered his head. The public accounts had an effect almost immediately. When townspeople saw that Wekau Hall had not raised its prices during the disaster, households began donating rice, grain, and cloth. Flood victims strong enough to work volunteered to build shelters and carry water. By evening, more than 30 simple thatched shelters stood on the high ground outside the city. Only then did the county government begin sending manpower. The magistrate personally came to inspect Wekau Hall. Seeing the orderly line at the gate, his expression was complicated. Miss Shen is certainly capable. It would be even better if Your Excellency opened the county's unused grain depots for shelter. He choked on his reply. Peiju said mildly from the side, I am sure Your Excellency would not refuse. The magistrate forced a smile. Of course not. That night, the first patient with a high fever was brought to the east courtyard. He was a boy of 12 or 13, burning with fever and suffering persistent diarrhea. His mother knelt on the ground, repeatedly bowing until her forehead touched the earth as she begged us to save him. As I examined the boy, my palms turned cold. In my previous life, the earliest signs of the post-flood epidemic had also been fever, vomiting, and diarrhea. Isolate them first, I told Shen Chongqing. Everyone who has had close contact with him must be housed separately. The mother clung to her son. I will not leave him. You may stay with him, but then you cannot have contact with anyone else. She nodded repeatedly. I did not have the expertise to diagnose an epidemic disease by myself, so Dr. Tang from Jiren Hall handled the formal diagnosis and prescriptions. Fortunately, the boy was still able to drink water and had not yet developed more dangerous signs. Using what I remembered from disaster prevention in my previous life, I had drinking water boiled, waste cleared promptly, and lime spread around the drainage ditches. Some people complained about the sharp smell of the lime, so I had the workers post the number of people outside the walls who had developed diarrhea after drinking untreated water. No one complained the next day. The hardest part was not treating illness. It was persuading everyone to follow the same rules. On the third day, representatives of the Chen family arrived. The man leading them was the shopkeeper of Deji Trading House. He brought 2 carts of silver and immediately offered to buy Wekau Hall's entire stock. 3 times the market price, not for sale. 5 times, not for sale. He glanced at the flood victims waiting in the courtyard. Miss Shen, business is meant to make money. If you sell this shipment to us, you could buy a large shop in the capital. And after I sell it to you, the Chen family will distribute it uniformly, at uniformly inflated prices? The Deji shopkeeper's face darkened. You should not make reckless accusations. I took out a copy of the shipping manifest Peiju had found. The medicine from the government warehouse was also uniformly distributed by you. Where did it go? His expression visibly changed when he saw the paper. The next moment, one of his men lunged forward to snatch it. Peiju caught his wrist at once. A sharp crack sounded from the man's wrist, and he dropped to his knees in pain before he could reach me. Attempting to seize evidence in broad daylight, Peiju said coldly, The Chen family's rules are certainly unusual. The Deji shopkeeper gritted his teeth. Do you know the consequences of offending the Chen family? Peiju released the man. No, I was hoping to find out. The Chen family's people left in humiliation. That afternoon, rumors spread through the city. People said Wekau Hall had taken in flood victims in order to test medicine on living patients. They said medicine made by women carried excessive yin energy, and that children who took it would grow up unable to have children of their own. Others said the Shen family had offended the Chancellor and would eventually be punished as an entire household. Some people who had been waiting for medicine began to hesitate. I did not rush to argue. Instead, I told everyone who had already received treatment that they could decide for themselves whether they were willing to speak publicly about what had happened after taking the medicine. The first to step forward was the mother of the boy with the fever. His fever had gone down, and he could sit up and drink porridge. She carried him to the gate and knelt in front of everyone. Wekau Hall saved my son's life. If anyone says Miss Shen harmed people, I will be the first to say that is a lie. Then came an elderly man whose leg had been treated, a wealthy man whose diarrhea was improving, and flood victims who had used the water purification packets. More and more people spoke. The rumors did not vanish, but they could no longer overwhelm what people had seen with their own eyes. By the 5th day, the other medicine shops in the city finally reopened. Their prices were still about 4 times the usual level. The price board outside Wikao Hall, however, had not increased by a single copper coin from the 1st day to the 5th. Shopkeeper Feng, who had once mocked a women-run apothecary, came quietly after sunset. "Miss Shen, can you spare 50 jin of patchouli for Feng's pharmacy?" I looked at him. "At what price?" His face reddened with embarrassment. "Your costs 20%? Fine." He stared at me. "You are not going to raise the price on me now? You are buying the medicine to sell to patients, not to hoard it. I had a contract brought over. There is one condition. Feng's retail price may not exceed Wiko Hall's by more than 30%. If you violate that, compensation is 10 times the contract value." Shopkeeper Feng clenched his jaw, then pressed his fingerprint onto the agreement. Peiju watched the entire exchange. "You do not hold grudges?" "I do." I put the contract away. That is why I did not give him anything for free. But turning that grudge into silver while allowing more sick people to buy medicine is more useful than watching him bow his head to me. Peiju looked at me. His gaze seemed even deeper than it had on the rainy night. "Shenj, what? You have not slept properly for 3 days." "I slept. Never as much as 2 hours at a time." "How do you know?" He did not answer. He simply pulled the ledger out of my hands. "Go rest. There are still 2 shipments to count." "I will count them." "You do not know the stock well enough." "I have watched for 7 days." I reached for the ledger. He caught my wrist. His grip was not painful, but I could not take the book back. "Before you save everyone else," he said, "make sure you stay alive." I went still. In my previous life, everyone had only ever told me to endure a little longer and do a little more. The Gu family needed me, the Chen family needed me, my husband needed me. No one ever asked whether I was tired. No one ever told me that I too was someone worth protecting. I stopped reaching for the ledger. 4 hours. 8, 6, agreed. He escorted me to the small room in the rear courtyard. At the doorway I suddenly turned back. "Peiju, Thank you." It was the first time in this life I accepted someone's help without immediately writing an IOU or calculating how I would repay it. He seemed momentarily surprised as well. Then the corner of his mouth raised slightly. "No interest charged." I slept for less than 4 hours before the sound of urgent hooves woke me. A second procession from the Chancellor's residence had arrived. This time the carriage bore the formal insignia of the left Chancellor himself. Gu Tingjong had come in person. When he stepped down, people along both sides of the street knelt. He wore a dark teal robe without ostentatious ornaments. He looked less like the powerful left Chancellor who could influence the entire court than a weary father who had traveled a long way to find his daughter. In my previous life, the first time I met him had also been after a rain like this. He stood in the main hall of the Chancellor's residence, lifted me from my formal bow and said gently, "You have suffered all these years. Because of that one sentence I swallowed 16 years of grievance." I thought he loved me. Only later did I understand what Gu Tingjong truly excelled at, exchanging the smallest amount of warmth for the greatest amount of loyalty. "Jue." In this life he called me the same way, his gentleness measured perfectly. I remained standing in front of Wikao Hall. I did not bow. The townspeople around us began looking at me with increasingly complicated expressions. Gu Tingjong did not become angry. He looked at the apothecary and the flood victims behind me. There was even something like approval in his eyes. "I heard that you opened your medicine stockpiles to aid the flood victims." I brought 2 carts of medicinal supplies and 5,000 taels of relief silver. The 2 carts were opened. They were indeed full of medicine boxes. Grateful exclamations rose from the crowd. I walked to the nearest crate and picked up a packet of Chinese skullcap. Its color was fresh, its quality high. It was the same batch that had been removed from the county government's medicinal warehouse. Gu Tingjong wanted to use medicine that had always belonged to the disaster victims to purchase the reputation of a loving father and virtuous chancellor. I put the packet back. "Since this medicine is for disaster relief, please hand it directly to the county government for registration. The clinics can then draw what they need." A brief pause appeared in Gu Tingjong's eyes. He had probably expected me to accept his generosity publicly and thereby owe him a debt. "Your arrangement is very sensible," he said smoothly. "But you are an unmarried young woman managing all this alone. It is too hard on you. I came to take you home." People immediately began persuading me. "Miss Shen, the Chancellor came himself. What grievance between father and daughter cannot be settled? Go back. It is surely better than guarding a little apothecary. The Chancellor is even willing to bring the Shen couple to the capital. What an honor." Gu Tingjong looked at Shen Chongqing and Madame Su. You two have raised Jue for many years. I, Gu, am deeply grateful. If you are willing, you may enter the capital with her. The Gu household will treat you as honored guests. You will want for nothing. Shen Changqing looked overwhelmed. Madame Su quietly caught my sleeve. I could feel her fingertips trembling, not from temptation, from fear. Gu Tingzhang appeared to have given everyone full dignity, but in front of the entire town he was actually sealing off every retreat. If I still refused, I would become an unfilial and ungrateful daughter. If I agreed, my adoptive parents would become hostages in the capital, convenient tools for controlling me. If the Chancellor truly wants to bring me home, I said, I have 3 conditions. A flash of genuine surprise crossed Gu Tingzhang's eyes. Speak. First, Shen Changqing and Madame Su are my parents. Even if I acknowledge my birth, I will not stop calling them father and mother, and I will never sever my relationship with them. That is only proper. Second, all Lin family property belongs to me personally. The Chancellor's residence may not manage it on my behalf. No one in the Gu family may interfere under the name of father or brother. The surroundings fell quiet. The smile on Gu Tingzhang's face faded slightly. You are still young and unfamiliar with managing businesses in the capital. If I can operate Wekao Hall, I can learn to manage the Lin family's businesses as well. Those businesses are complicated. They are nothing like one small apothecary. Then any failure will be mine to bear. I looked at him. Unless the Chancellor wants me back only because of the Lin property. Whispers rose again around us. Gu Tingzhang did not answer that point. And your third condition? The Chancellor's residence will publicly release every record of its efforts to find its missing daughter during the last 16 years. His expression finally darkened. What records? Reports to the authorities, missing person notices, the people sent to search, and the silver spent. I spoke each phrase distinctly. The Chancellor says he has thought of me all these years. If that is true, he must have searched. Shen Changqing raised his head sharply. The townspeople around us understood as well. That's right, the Chancellor's household is so powerful. How could it fail to find Miss Shen for 16 years when she has been living openly in Qinghe County? The Shen family did not hide her. Did they never actually look? Gu Tingzhang's face barely changed, but I saw the hand behind his back slowly clench. In my previous life I had never asked this question. The Gu family told me they had only recently uncovered the truth, and I believed them. Not until shortly before my death, when I saw old Lin family records, did I learn that Gu Tingzhang had known where I was since I was 10. At that time, my maternal grandfather was still alive. I did not yet need to inherit the Lin estate. So Gu Tingzhang did not bring me back. The midwife from those years disappeared long ago, he finally said. The trail was broken several times. Some records concern confidential court matters and cannot be released publicly, I smiled. Searching for one's daughter is a court secret now? The mask of the loving father finally cracked. Jiwei, he said more heavily, you have lived outside the family for many years. It is understandable that you resent your parents, but family shame should not be displayed publicly. You should not question your elders like this in front of everyone. If the Chancellor does not wish to answer, then please return to the capital. He paused. Gu Tingzhang rarely lost composure in public. The more controlled he became, the more furious I knew he was. Just then the curtain of another carriage lifted. Gu Mingju stepped down. She wore a pale moon-white dress and her face was noticeably paler than when I had last seen her. Madame Zhou was not with her. Gu Mingju walked to Gu Tingzhang's side and gave me a very faint smile. Elder sister. The title made everyone look toward her. Then she turned to Gu Tingzhang. Father, elder sister has lived away from home for many years. It is natural that she has doubts. Why not have the search records sorted out first, so outsiders do not misunderstand you? Gu Tingzhang looked at her. It was only one glance, but Gu Mingju's fingers tightened sharply inside her sleeve. You are unwell, speak less. Yes, she lowered her head. In my previous life, I had always believed Gu Tingzhang cherished Gu Mingju most. Now I saw that even his affection existed only so long as she remained obedient. He did not pressure me further that day. He left the medicine behind and took his household entourage to an inn in the county. Before leaving, he said quietly, Jiwei, I will give you time to think clearly. The Gu family's gate will not remain open forever for a daughter who defies her father. I looked at him. That is convenient. I have no intention of entering it. After the Chancellor's procession left, the crowd remained for a long time. Some still thought I was ungrateful. Others had begun questioning the true reason the Gu family had suddenly come to acknowledge me. Gu Tingzhang wanted to use public opinion to force me. I simply forced everyone to notice which questions he refused to answer. That night, Gu Mingju came to Weka Hall alone. She brought no maid. The hem of her clothes was splashed with mud. I let her in. The first thing she said after sitting down was, "You were right." I did not ask what she meant. She took a prescription paper from her sleeve. I found 3 physicians. The fragrance sachet, the beauty tonic, and the calming pills I take every day all contain substances that should not be there. Her voice was steady, but the hand holding the paper trembled badly. Mother personally ordered every one of those things prepared. Did you ask her about it? She raised her eyes. You told me not to alert anyone. I pushed the restorative prescription I had already prepared toward her. Stop the medicine first. You have been exposed for too long, so recovery will be slow. Can it be cured? It was the first time she had ever spoken to me in a voice that sounded almost fragile. I cannot promise. The color drained gradually from her face. After a long silence, she laughed once without humor. She was always so good to me. When I was sick, she stayed awake all night. When practicing the zither left my fingers raw, she applied the medicine herself. She looked down at the prescription, and those medicines were hers too. I did not comfort her. Some truths were so heavy that any comforting sentence sounded shallow. Gu Mingju wiped the corner of one eye. Does father know? I don't know. Do you believe he would protect you? She did not answer. The look Gu Tingzhang had given her in daylight already answered enough. After a long silence, she took a brass key from inside her clothing. This is the key to the west courtyard of the Lin family's old residence. I looked at her. Where did you get it? Father had someone find it among mother's old possessions. By mother she meant my birth mother, Lin Wanyi. The Chancellor's residence is looking for a hidden chamber. They think the real key, or clues to it, are inside the Lin ancestral residence. Why give this to me? I am not giving it for free. Gu Mingju straightened. The vulnerability in her eyes disappeared behind sharpness again. I help you enter the Lin residence. You help me discover whose daughter I really am. I looked at the key on the table. In my previous life, the two of us had fought over the Gu family's single position as legitimate daughter until both of us were ruined. In this life, Gu Mingju had finally begun asking a different question. If she left the Gu family, who could she still be? Agreed. I took the key. But we make one thing clear first. What? We are not sisters. Gu Mingju gave a cold laugh. I did not plan to call you elder sister either. During this cooperation, all information is shared. If you conceal something important, I end it immediately. The same applies to you. She held out her hand. I looked at the pampered hand that was now trembling slightly, then finally shook it. Deal. Peiju's voice came from outside the door. Finished negotiating? Gu Mingju withdrew her hand at once. He entered, his gaze moving over the brass key on the table. Someone from the Chancellor's residence went to the Lin ancestral house tonight. Gu Mingju and I stood simultaneously. Who? One of Gu Tingzhang's trusted men. Peiju looked at me. They are searching for a room that does not appear on the official plans. I tightened my fingers around the key. The hidden chamber might truly exist. The Lin ancestral residence stood in the southern outskirts of Qinghe County. After the Lin family declined, an old servant had continued guarding it. 6 months earlier, the Chancellor's residence had taken control under the excuse of repairs, and ordinary people were no longer allowed inside. We chose a late night after the rain finally stopped. Gu Mingju changed into men's clothing and tied up her long hair. On her first attempt to climb the wall, her foot slipped and she came down directly into my arms. Can you be more careful? She righted herself quickly and brushed mud from her clothes. Young ladies of the Chancellor's household are not required to learn wall climbing. You are required now. Be quiet. Peiju had already crossed into the courtyard. He looked at us, his gaze pausing briefly on Gu Mingju's men's clothing. Young lady Gu. She glared at him. What are you looking at? Stop wasting time. He turned away. Only thinking that the Chancellor's walls are apparently not high enough. I nearly laughed aloud. No one had lived in the west courtyard for years. Dust filled the rooms and faded illustrations of medicinal plants hung on the walls. Gu Mingju's key opened a concealed cabinet in the study, but inside were only several ordinary medical books. We searched for nearly 2 hours without finding any entrance to a hidden chamber. Could father's people have already removed everything? Gu Mingju asked. I picked up a worn copy of a herbal record. The cover was badly rubbed, but its pages were cleaner than the surrounding books. At the very end was one handwritten sentence. Medicine has roots, so do people. The handwriting matched the marginal notes in the Lin family's old medicinal manuscripts. I looked at a plant illustration on the wall. It showed an unremarkable white angelica plant, but its root system had 3 more branches than such drawings normally included. I crossed the room and pressed the third painted root. A soft mechanical sound came from inside the wall. The bookcase moved aside, revealing a narrow stone stairway. Gu Mingju whispered, There really is one. Peiju lit a tinder stick. I will go down first. Together. He looked at me once, then did not object. The hidden chamber was small. There was no gold or silver. Only a wooden table, several sealed chests, and walls densely covered in diagrams of medicinal plants. The first chest contained deeds to the Lin family's businesses. The second held half of an old account book. Its entries showed that 11 years earlier, the Chen family had purchased high-grade medicine from the Lin family at low prices under the name of government procurement, then replaced the stock delivered to the government with inferior goods. Several annotations beside those transactions contained Gu Tingzhang's name. Gu Mingju stood beside me, her breathing gradually quickening. Father was already working with the Chen family then? At least 12 years ago, Peiju said. He turned another page and stopped at one name. Pei Xian. I looked at him. His face showed nothing but his knuckles had gone pale. Who is that, my father? The flame trembled slightly. After a moment, Peiju finally took a badge from inside his clothes. It was not the ordinary official token I had once suspected from the traces among his belongings. It was the authority badge of a vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review. My real name is Peiji. Gu Mingju took half a step back. A vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review? I had long known his background could not be simple. Even so, seeing the badge made something tighten inside my chest. You approached the Shen family because you were investigating this case? Not at first. Then why? I was attacked at Liushi. Shopkeeper Shen saved me. And later? He looked at me. Later I discovered that you knew Lin family processing methods and medicine movements you should not have been able to know. So you investigated me. Yes. He did not try to soften it. The medicinal book, the accounts, the people I met, you checked all of it? Yes. My fingers slowly closed. Chen Linchuan had hidden many things from me at the beginning too. He said it was to protect me. Later every new deception could be justified the same way. I pushed the badge back toward Peiji. The hidden chamber has been found. Vice Minister Pei can continue the investigation himself. Jiwei, do not call me that. He fell quiet. Gu Mingju glanced between us and unusually did not interrupt. She only lowered her head and continued searching the chest. Peiji did not approach me. He placed his badge, his personal notebook and the court's cooperation documents on the table. I investigated you. I also concealed my identity. You may verify these things as slowly and thoroughly as you like. You may end our cooperation too. He looked directly at me. I am not asking you to trust me immediately. I am only telling you that from now on, I will not lie to you again. The hidden chamber was very quiet. In my previous life, what I feared most was hearing someone say, trust me. That phrase was so often followed by another use of me. Peiji did not ask for my trust. He gave me the evidence and the choice. I did not take his official badge. I only picked up his personal notebook. I will keep this. He moved to the other side of the room and said nothing more. The third chest contained only an incomplete prescription and an unsigned letter. The prescription listed 7 ingredients. The second half had been torn away. On the envelope were the words, for my daughter Jiwei, to be opened by her personally. My hand stopped in midair. It was Lin Wanyi's handwriting. In my previous life I had died without ever seeing a letter she left for me. I opened it. There were only 2 short pages. Jiwei, if you are reading this letter, Mother is probably no longer able to search for you in person. The first sentence blurred before my eyes. I blinked hard and continued. Lin Wanyi had discovered when I was 5 that the infant girl in the household had been switched. She traced the old midwife to Qinghe County and secretly sent people to search. But Gu Tingzhang discovered what she was doing. He confined her inside the Chancellor's residence, claiming she was too ill to receive visitors, and cut off her contact with the outside world. The last information she received was that I had been adopted by a family surnamed Shen. She had planned to leave the Chancellor's residence with evidence, but before she could do so, someone began poisoning her slowly. There was no accusation in the letter. Only apology written again and again. Mother did not abandon you. Mother simply failed to remain alive long enough to reach you. My hands began to shake. In my previous life, after I returned to the Chancellor's residence, everyone told me my birth mother had always been frail and bedridden, and had never truly looked for me. I had resented her. I resented that she gave birth to me but did not protect me. Now I learned she had once been so close. Someone else had cut away the hand she extended toward me. At the end of the letter she wrote, I do not ask you to make the Lin family prosperous. I only hope its property can become a refuge you can fall back on for the rest of your life. If the Gu family treats you badly, do not remain for the sake of blood. You are yourself first. Only after that are you anyone's daughter. Tears finally fell onto the paper. I wiped them away quickly with my sleeve, afraid of smearing the words she had left behind. Gu Mingju stood some distance away. She did not come to comfort me, she only placed a clean handkerchief on the table. I picked it up. Thank you. I only do not want you ruining the letter, she said, turning her face away. Do not misunderstand. Strangely, I heard a little familiar tenderness inside that awkward sentence. Peiji remained beside the stone steps. He did not approach or say anything to interrupt my grief. Only after I had folded the letter again did he speak. Someone is coming. Footsteps sounded above us. More than one person. Gu Mingju immediately extinguished one lamp. Father's people. The hidden chamber had only one obvious exit. Peiji took a short blade from the wall. You two stay here. No. I slipped half of the old account book into my clothing. If they find nothing, they will not give up. Gu Mingju searched the walls quickly. There should be an air passage. She pointed to a row of tiny openings near the corner. I followed them with my fingers and found another mechanism behind an herbal diagram. A narrow passage opened in the wall, only wide enough for one person at a time. Peiji sent us inside first. After several steps I looked back. And you? I will erase the traces. Come with us. If they discover the entrance, let them discover it. I looked at him. We already have the account book. There is no reason to risk yourself over an empty room. Something shifted in Peiji's eyes. Perhaps he was accustomed to staying behind. Perhaps he was also accustomed to no one asking whether he intended to leave with everyone else. After a moment he put the blade away and followed. The passage led to a dry well in the rear garden. We had barely climbed out when the sound of a door being forced open came from the study. Gu Mingju looked back toward the study and said quietly, "My father will not stop. Neither will we." I tightened my hold on the account book. After a moment of silence, Gu Mingju said, "Shen Juwei, I found out that the midwife from 16 years ago is still alive." I looked sharply at her. "Where is she?" "At a Chen family villa in the capital." Gu Mingju clenched her jaw. "And my biological father may have been Lu Yuan, an accountant who once worked for the Lin family. His name appears in the surviving half of the old records. He was one of the first people to discover that government medicinal purchases were being falsified, and he disappeared 12 years ago. We did not return to the capital immediately. The outbreak in Qinghe County was not yet fully under control, and Weikao Hall could not simply be abandoned. Peiji made 3 copies of the old account book. One went to the Court of Judicial Review, one went to a censor he trusted. The original that had been in my hands was hidden in a secure place on one of the Lin family's medicinal mountains. After that, Peiji stopped hiding his movements from me. Before he sent out a letter, he told me what it contained and where it was going. I also finished reading his private notes. They contained more than information about the missing government medicine. There was an investigation into me as well. Shen Jiwei, 16 years old. Adopted daughter of the Shen family. Skilled in medicinal processing and bookkeeping. Purchased large quantities of dampness-dispelling and heat-clearing herbs ahead of time. Motive uncertain. On the final page he had added another note. Acts according to principle. Saves people without seeking fame. Provisionally trustworthy. I carried the notebook into the courtyard, where he was drying damp official documents. Vice Minister Pei's opinion of me is rather high. He looked up. It says provisionally trustworthy. And now? He studied me for a moment. Trustworthy. I set the notebook in front of him. I still do not like being investigated. I know. And just because you admit it, it does not mean I will pretend it never happened. You should not. But our cooperation can continue. His hand paused halfway through turning a page. Only cooperation? I looked at him. What else does Vice Minister Pei want? A faint smile touched his eyes. Nothing for now. Good. I turned away, but the corner of my mouth rose before I could stop it. By the 10th day the outbreak was beginning to ease. The boy who had been the first to develop a high fever could already get out of bed and walk. Most new patients outside the city were suffering diarrhea caused by unsafe drinking water, and it had not spread on a large scale. Weikao Hall's water purification packets and isolation measures had worked. The county magistrate sent a memorial to the capital, but wrote most of the credit under his own name. Peiji read a copy and asked only, "Do you want to expose him?" No. I continued checking the medicine consumption accounts. Why not? The flood victims have been resettled. For now it does not matter how many lines of credit he claims in a memorial. You do not care? I care. I looked up. That is why I am keeping the evidence. If he tries to shift blame onto someone else later, I will settle everything at once. Peiji laughed softly. Shopkeeper Shen certainly holds grudges, always have. At that time an old Lin family shopkeeper came to see me. His surname was Qin. He was nearly 60 and had managed medicinal goods beside my maternal grandfather for 20 years. When he saw the Lin family deeds in my hands, he dropped to his knees and cried so hard that he could barely speak. The old master waited his whole life. He always believed the young mistress was still alive. I helped him up. When did my grandfather learn where I was? 10 years ago. Shopkeeper Chin wiped his tears, but the Chancellor's residents watched everything too closely. The old master sent 2 groups of people to find you, and both disappeared. Later, when he became gravely ill, he could only revise his will and leave the estate to the Lin family's true granddaughter. A dull ache spread through my chest. So it had not only been my birth mother who searched for me. The Lin family had never given up either. In my previous life, the Chancellor's residence had simply cut off every message before it could reach me. Shopkeeper Chin took me to inspect the Lin family's medicinal mountains. 2 mountains had been controlled by the Chen family for years. Their highest-grade medicinal crops had been entered into the accounts at artificially low prices and then resold for far more. More than half the old Lin retainers had been replaced. Those who remained were paid a pittance. I produced the deeds and took back management authority on the spot. The Chen manager refused to hand over the warehouse keys. These properties have been managed on behalf of the Chancellor's residence for years. On what grounds can Miss Shen simply take them back? The land deeds say they belong to the Lin family. You have not formally entered the Lin genealogy. How can you prove you are of Lin blood? I placed Lin Wanyi's letter and my grandfather's will before him. If you still doubt them, we can have the government verify them. But from this moment on, not a single medicinal plant is to leave this mountain. The manager sneered. Miss Shen thinks she can take over a medicinal mountain with only a handful of people? More than 20 guards stood behind him. Peiji had brought no officers, and I had brought only several women from Waiko Hall and a few old Lin retainers. There was no need to fight. I had shopkeeper Chin bring out the wage records from the past 3 years. The Chen family owed herb gatherers and mountain guards a total of 1,300 taels. I looked at the men behind the manager. Anyone willing to remain and work for the Lin family will receive every coin of back pay within 3 days. From now on, wages will be increased by 20%. Anyone who still wishes to guard the mountain for the Chen family can collect what they are owed from the Chens themselves. The guards exchanged looks. The first to lower his staff was a middle-aged man. I'll stay. Then came a second, then a third. In less than 15 minutes, only 4 men remained behind the Chen manager. I had not used official power to seize the mountain. I had merely returned to these workers what the Chen family already owed them. The manager's face darkened. In the end, he had no choice but to hand over the keys. That afternoon I formally took control of 2 medicinal mountains and 7 herb estates. The old Lin retainers gathered before the ancestral residence and bowed to me. I did not allow them to address me as Miss Gu. My surname is Shen, and I am also a daughter of the Lin family. From now on, every account will be audited again. Unpaid wages come first. In a disaster year, the prices of common medicines may not be raised without authorization. Shopkeeper Chin and the others agreed at once. When Gu Tingzhang heard, he personally sent a letter. He wrote that the Lin family holdings were vast, that I did not understand such a large business, and that if I insisted on forcing my way through it, I would eventually ruin everything my mother's family had built. I burned the letter. The next day, I temporarily shut down and reorganized 3 herb estates that had been losing money for years. I also merged 2 shops whose operations overlap. In less than 10 days, the Lin properties, which had appeared to be running at a loss, had cut nearly 1,000 taels in unnecessary expenses. Gu Tingzhang sent no second letter. After the outbreak subsided, I set 2 memorial tablets in the Shen family's main room. One bore the name Lin Wanyi, the other bore the name of my maternal grandfather Lin Henyan. Madame Su wiped the tablets clean herself. Shen Changqing arranged the offerings beside them. I knelt and touched my forehead to the floor 3 times. Mother, the words still felt strange in my mouth. I do not blame you anymore. I will protect what you left behind, but I will not return to the Gu family. Footsteps sounded outside. Peiji stopped at the doorway instead of entering. Only after I had finished paying my respects did he come forward and place a bundle of freshly gathered white angelica beside the offerings. Madame Lin mentioned in her letter that she liked this herb. I looked at him. How did you know? Every medicinal illustration on the hidden room's wall had annotations. Beside the white angelica drawing there were only 2 characters, Wanyi. He had noticed something so small that I had missed it, and he had remembered. Thank you. No you this time? He asked. A bundle of flowers hardly requires one. Good. We walked out of the main room together. The setting sun fell across the herbs drying in the courtyard. News came from the capital, Peiji said. The midwife? She is alive. The Chen villa is already empty though. She was moved into the capital. I frowned. By Gutingzhang? Uncertain there is something else. He stopped. Cases of the same epidemic have appeared in the capital. I looked at him. In my previous life, after the epidemic spread there, the Chen family introduced an expensive medicine called the Bailing pill. In truth, it had only been altered from a simple Lin family epidemic formula, yet they sold it for 10 times the price of ordinary medicine. I have to go to the capital. What about Wiko Hall? Aunt Yang can manage the women. Shopkeeper Xing can oversee the Lin herb estates. I looked back toward the memorial tablets. The other half of the old account book and the original formula might both still be in Chen hands. Gu Mingju had already returned to the capital as well. Peiji asked, "Do you trust her?" "Not completely, and you will still cooperate. She has no way back. Even someone with nowhere else to go can still betray you. That is why I have kept another safeguard." He did not try to persuade me further. "When do we leave?" "In 3 days. At that very moment, carriage wheels stopped outside the pharmacy. Chen Linchuan entered with several Chen family guards. He looked different from the last time he had come seeking medicine. He wore an expensive brocade robe and a jade token at his waist that only a member of the Chen family's main branch could use. In little more than a month, he seemed to have been formally restored to the main Chen line. His gaze fell first on me, then on Peiji. "Miss Shen, we meet again." Chen Linchuan had come to Qinghe County as the Chen family's representative for government medicine distribution. He brought a county document demanding that private pharmacies turn over their remaining medicinal stock for unified Chen family allocation. Wikao Hall was included. "The epidemic in the capital is severe." He placed the document on the table. "The Chen family has been ordered to coordinate medicinal supplies between north and south. Since Miss Shen now controls the Lin medicinal mountains, you should all the more cooperate with the court." I read the document from beginning to end. It was merely a Ministry of Revenue notice ordering local governments to inventory medicinal stock. It gave the Chen family no authority whatsoever to seize private medicine. An inventory is not a takeover. In extraordinary times, extraordinary measures are naturally necessary. And by extraordinary measures, young Master Chen means forcing common people to buy only the Chen family's expensive medicine? His expression did not change. Moving medicinal goods requires manpower and money. Some increase in price is reasonable. What about the government warehouse stock? What? I took out a copy of the Lush Wharf shipping manifest. 3,000 jin of high-grade government medicine were moved into a private Deji trading house warehouse before the flood. Since young Master Chen is responsible for coordination, perhaps you can explain that. He glanced at the copy. Those matters are handled by senior members of the family. They are not mine to question. Yet it is somehow yours to seal my pharmacy. The smile at Chen Linchuan's lips finally faded. Peiji sat to one side and had not interrupted once. Chen Linchuan seemed determined to ignore him. He looked only at me. "Miss Shen, let us speak alone." "There is no need. It concerns you personally." I already knew what he wanted to say, but I still led him to the rear courtyard. Peiji did not follow. As I passed him, he said quietly, "I will be outside." It was not an order, and it was not an attempt to stop me. He was simply telling me where he would be. Under the rear veranda, Chen Linchuan stopped. "The Gu family has already discussed a marriage arrangement with the Chen family. Congratulations. The original intended bride was the Gu family's true legitimate daughter, and?" He looked directly at me. "If you are willing to return to the Chancellor's residence, the marriage arrangement can still be changed." Once, those were the words I had wanted most desperately to hear. I had believed that marrying Chen Linchuan was the only happiness I could control after entering the Chancellor's residence. Now I found the thought almost absurd. "Have you not already been discussing marriage with Gu Mingju?" "Nothing has been formally settled, so you came to me, because I have taken control of the Lin medicinal business." Something flickered in his eyes. "Why must you think of everything in the ugliest possible way? When my mother was gravely ill, you were willing to let me take medicine on credit. That proves you are not a cold person. If we marry, the Chen family can help manage the Lin business, while you gain the protection of both the Chancellor's residence and the Chen family." Every sentence sounded like my previous life. When he spoke of marriage, he calculated property, connections, and advantage. What I truly wanted had never mattered. Chen Linchuan. It was the first time in this life that I had called him by his full name. For an instant he seemed startled by the familiarity of it. "What you need is not a wife. You need a shopkeeper who will keep your books, earn money for you, take the blame for you, and then thank you for granting her the title of principal wife." His face turned cold. "You are prejudiced against me. We have met only twice. On what grounds can you judge me this way?" I studied his young handsome face. In my previous life he had worn the same gentle expression even before my death. Some people did not suddenly become cruel. Their ambition simply had not yet acquired enough power to show its full shape. On the grounds that you brought an order that gives you no right to seal private pharmacies and tried to force me to surrender my medicine. On the grounds that you know Gu Mingzhu's true background, yet still weigh two women against each other, according to which one is more valuable. And on the grounds that not once in anything you have said today, have you asked what I want. Chen Linchuan stared at me. You would rather choose that man of unknown origin? I laughed. Rejecting you is my own choice. It has nothing to do with any man. The courtyard door opened. Pei Ji walked in. Chen Linchuan looked at him. Listening secretly to another person's conversation is hardly the conduct of a gentleman. I was not listening secretly. Pei Ji handed him a document. Young Master Chen was speaking very loudly. Chen Linchuan did not take it. Who exactly are you? Pei Ji took out an official token. Pei Ji, Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review. Chen Linchuan's face changed instantly. The missing government medicine case has been transferred to the Court of Judicial Review. Pei Ji opened the document. DG Trading House is suspected of transferring government medicine and falsifying transport records. All of its warehouses in Qinghai County are to be sealed. The Chen representative is required to remain in the county and cooperate with the investigation. Chen Linchuan quickly recovered his composure. I came here under family orders. I know nothing about this. Whether you knew will be determined after investigation. You have no right to detain me. The document bears the seals of both the Ministry of Justice and the Court of Judicial Review. Pei Ji looked at him. If young Master Chen cannot read it, I can read it aloud for you. For the first time Chen Linchuan lost his habitual gentleness. He turned on me. You were already colluding with him. That is why you rejected the marriage. You attached yourself to the Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review. My fingertips went cold. In my previous life he had always done this. Whenever I stopped obeying him he explained my choice as someone else's manipulation, as though I could never possess a will of my own. Pei Ji stepped forward. I lifted a hand to stop him. I will answer for myself. He stopped. I looked at Chen Linchuan. I rejected you because you are not worthy of me. Who Pei Ji is does not change that answer. Chen Linchuan clenched his fist. Only then did Pei Ji speak. She rejected you because she chose to. You have no right to blame her decision on any man. His voice was calm, yet those words warmed my chest more than any declaration of possession ever could. Chen Linchuan was ultimately kept in Qinghai County by the court officers. 3 Deji warehouses were sealed. Inside them was not only government medicine taken from the Qinghai warehouse, but also government stock from 4 other prefectures. The quantity was far greater than we had expected, yet every account book covered only the last 3 years. The records from 12 years ago and the Lin epidemic formula were still in the capital. That evening, Chen Linchuan sent me a letter through an intermediary. It contained only one sentence. Shen Jiwei, you will regret the choice you made today. I threw it into the brazier. Pei Ji sat across from me and watched the paper curl in the flame. You are not keeping it as evidence. A single threat proves little. Are you afraid? Yes, I answered honestly. The Chen family and the Chancellor's residence had operated in the capital for many years. The evidence in our hands was enough to prove the disappearance of government medicine, but not yet enough to bring down Gu Tingzhang. But I will go even if I am afraid. Pei Ji nodded. We leave tomorrow. Not in 3 days? An urgent report came from the capital. He placed a public notice on the table. The Chen family had officially released the bailing pill, claiming that 1 pill could prevent and treat the epidemic. A single pill sold for 2 taels of silver, more than many ordinary people could earn in a month. At the bottom of the notice was another line. The bailing pill formula comes from a secret Lin family prescription. The Chen family had not only stolen the formula. They intended to use the Lin name so that any blame and danger could later be pushed onto me. I folded the notice. Then we go now. The capital had fallen into panic earlier than I remembered. Long lines of people seeking medicine filled the streets. Wooden barriers had been erected outside every Chen pharmacy. Each person was allowed to buy only 1 bailing pill, yet the price had already risen from 2 taels to 3. Some people brought out heirloom jewelry just to buy 1 pill for a sick child. Those who could not afford it knelt outside the pharmacies, bowing to the ground as they begged. A Chen clerk shouted from behind the barrier, "Bailing pills are limited. If you have no silver, do not block the road." In the crowd a woman was shoved to the ground. The child in her arms was burning with fever and too weak even to cry. I stepped forward and took the child. "Where have you tried to get treatment?" The woman was crying. "Every clinic says we must buy a bailing pill first." I checked the child's pulse and tongue. It was not the most severe form of the epidemic. The child had a high fever and was dehydrated. Peiji immediately called over the officers traveling with us. We rented an empty courtyard in the southern part of the city and hung up the Waiko Hall sign. 3 Lin family branches in the capital opened their storehouses at the same time. When stock was insufficient, I arranged shipments from the medicinal mountains outside the city and from Qingye County. Shopkeeper Chin had already followed my instructions and dispersed common medicines among several storage points. The Chen family could block one trade route. They could not block all of them. Gu Mingju came to see me on the second day. She was thinner than she had been in Qinghe, but her eyes were sharper. The Chen family knows you are in the capital, and the Chancellor's residence. My father told me to persuade you to return. She drew an invitation from her sleeve. He says that if you hand over the Lin properties and the remaining prescription fragment, everything that happened before can be forgiven. I glanced at it and set it aside. What did you tell him? I said I would try to persuade you. She gave a cold laugh. If I had refused, he would not have let me leave the residence. Have you found the midwife? Not yet. Gu Mingju pushed a sketch of the Chancellor's residence inner compound toward me. But I found something else. Madame Zhou goes to a villa west of the city on the 15th of every month. The place is heavily guarded. The midwife may be hidden there. Peiji took the map. I will send people to investigate. Gu Mingju looked at him. Vice Minister Pei, my father had people inside the Court of Judicial Review too. He may learn of every move you make in advance. Then this time I will not use court officers, he answered without hesitation. Gu Mingju paused, apparently not expecting him to trust information she had supplied. There is one more thing. She looked at me. I obtained the Chen family's baling pill formula. The formula used 12 ingredients. 7 matched the fragment from the Lin hidden room. The other 5 were costly tonics with limited value in treating the illness. The Chen family had deliberately turned a simple formula into an expensive one so they could charge an extraordinary price. The true essentials were not rare medicines at all. They were clean water, early isolation, and adjusting ordinary medicine according to a patient's symptoms. Several physicians in the capital agreed to work with me. We shut ourselves in for 3 days and compared my grandfather's surviving formula, Lin Wanyi's annotations, and everything we had learned during the Qinghe relief effort. We completed a practical prescription that I called the Qingyi formula. Its base required only 7 common medicines. 1 dose cost less than 20 copper coins. On the 4th day, I held a public formula examination outside the Imperial Medical Academy. The Chen family sent several physicians to challenge me in front of the crowd. You have privately altered an ancestral formula and are gambling with human lives. The epidemic changes from patient to patient. How many medical texts can a woman like you possibly have read, yet you dare claim you can cure it? I stood behind the medicine table. I have never claimed the Qingyi formula cures every epidemic case. It is intended only for early prevention and mild illness. Severe cases still require a physician to diagnose and adjust treatment. Anyone who claims one pill can cure everyone is the one truly gambling with human lives. The onlookers turned toward the Chen family's baling pill notices. The Chen physicians' faces hardened. How can you prove your formula works? Choose patients with similar mild symptoms. Let the Imperial Medical Academy and 3 civilian clinics examine them together. Half will receive the Qingyi formula and half the baling pill. Every medicine used, every change in symptoms, and every expense will be publicly recorded. I looked directly at them. Do you dare? The Chen family could not refuse. Refusal would be the same as admitting that the baling pill could not withstand examination. The comparison lasted 5 days. Recovery rates among the 2 groups were similar, but the amount spent on one baling pill patient was enough to supply the Qingyi formula to 100 people. More importantly, several patients who took the baling pill developed chest tightness and abdominal bloating because its heavy tonics were unnecessary for their condition. When the results were posted, the entire street erupted in discussion. The Chen family still tried to spread rumors, so I went further. I had the complete formula, processing method, and permitted ingredient substitutions copied out and posted at 12 city gates and outside cooperating clinics. Have you gone mad? Gu Mingju stared at the sheets being copied by ordinary people. That is a secret Lin family formula. A secret formula locked in a box cannot save anyone. You could have made a fortune from it. The Lin family already has enough property. I looked at the people lining up to copy the prescription. I do not want everyone to have to beg me to buy medicine. I want them to be able to live without begging anyone. Gu Mingju was silent for a long time. You are different from what I imagined. What did you imagine? I thought you had come back to take everything from me. And now? She looked away. Now I think the Gu family's things are probably beneath you. Not beneath me's, I said, not worth it. After the Qingyi formula became public, the bailing pill price fell 3 times in a single day. The Chen family's hoarded expensive tonics sat unsold. Pharmacies throughout the capital began voluntarily adopting Weiko Hall's dispensing rules. Lin family women trained in medicine were assigned to relief stations, where they registered patients, prepared prescriptions, and inspected water sources. The same people who had once claimed that women touching medicine brought bad luck, now stood in line more obediently than anyone. My satisfaction lasted only 2 days. On the 3rd morning, Peiji did not appear at the medicine station. I found him sitting on a stone step in the rear courtyard, his face unnaturally pale. What is wrong? Nothing. He stood and his body swayed. I caught him. The instant my palm touched his forehead, my heart sank. He was burning with fever. You have a fever? I got caught in the rain last night. What else? He said nothing. I pulled back his sleeve. Several red marks had appeared along the inside of his arm, signs consistent with the early stage of the epidemic. My hands went cold. Even in my previous life, when the fire closed around me, I had not felt fear like this. Inside, it came out as an order. Peiji was still thinking about the investigation. The West City Villa tonight. Be quiet. I helped him into an isolation room. Say one more sentence about the case, and I will have someone tie you to the bed. Leaning against the headboard, he somehow still had enough strength to smile. Shopkeeper Shen is frightening. Then be twice as frightened. All right. He agreed far too quickly, as if anything I said was acceptable. His illness was worse than an ordinary mild case. His earlier wound had not fully healed, and continuous travel and overwork had exhausted him. The fever lasted 2 full days. I stayed beside his bed and barely slept. On the 3rd night he suddenly took my hand. His palm was burning. Jue, I looked down. His eyes were still closed. I am not asking you to promise me a lifetime. I only want to know one thing. When I wake up, will you still be here? My throat tightened. In my previous life, Chen Linchuan had always demanded vows. I had to swear never to leave him, swear to guard his family property, swear to believe him no matter what happened. Peiji did not ask me for my entire life. He only asked whether I would still be there when he opened his eyes. I will. I closed my hand around his. I will be here. His fingers slowly relaxed. On the 4th morning, the fever finally broke. When Peiji woke, I had fallen asleep beside the bed. The instant he moved, I woke too. Where do you feel uncomfortable? Hungry. I froze for a moment, then exhaled. If you can feel hungry, that is a good sign. I stood to fetch porridge, but he did not release my hand. Jue. What? Does what you promised still count? I knew what he meant. I only promised that I would be here when you woke. And now? His face still showed the exhaustion of illness, but his gaze was completely serious. I sat down again. Peiji, I will not give up Weiko Hall for anyone. I know. And I will not hand over the Lin properties simply because I marry. They are yours. I may spend much of the year traveling. I will not remain in the capital forever. Then I can go to you. He answered every condition without hesitation. The wall around my heart, built in another lifetime, seemed at last to develop a crack. Then we can talk again after you recover. Does that count as agreeing? It counts as giving you a chance. This time he did not hide his smile. Good. That afternoon, Gu Mingzhu brought 3 secret letters exchanged between Gu Tingzhang and the Chen family patriarch. One mentioned the poison used against Lin Wanyi. Another referred to Lu Yuan's disappearance years earlier. Where did you get these? I asked. My father's study. There was a fresh cut across the back of her hand. Madame Zhou discovered me. How did you get out? Before I went in, I arranged for copies of the letters to go 3 separate ways. She looked at Peiji. One to the Court of Judicial Review, one to a trusted censor, and one here. Even if they caught me, they could not stop the information. I looked at her. The girl who had once entrusted every hope to the Gu family's affection had finally learned to keep her own life in her own hands. What about the midwife? She is at the West City Villa. But my father went there this morning. Gu Mingzhu's face tightened. He may be going to silence her. Peiji immediately pushed away the blanket and tried to stand. I pressed him back. You are not well yet. There is no time. He gave me his Court of Judicial Review token. You go to the Chancellor's residence, I will go to the villa. Jiwei. He looked at me steadily. We each do what we are best at. I knew he was right. The last decisive evidence was in the midwife's testimony and the missing half of the old records. Gu Tingzhang was most likely to bring the old account book back to the Chancellor's residence and destroy it. Come back alive, I said. Peiji squeezed my hand once. The fire at the Gu Ancestral Hall began late that night. Gu Mingzhu led me into the Chancellor's residence through a small western gate. She had lived there for 16 years and could avoid the night servants almost with her eyes closed. If father, intends to burn the accounts, he will choose the ancestral hall, she whispered. Normally only he is allowed inside. If anything happens, he can blame it on an incense fire. When we arrived, the doors had already been locked. Firelight flickered behind the windows. I used a stone to break one open. Smoke poured out, and we could hear paper burning inside. Gu Mingju seized a passing night servant. Get water. The servant recognized her and immediately shouted for help. The Chancellor's residence descended into confusion. By the time Gu Tingjang arrived, the ancestral hall doors had been forced open. I pulled a half-burned account book from beside the brazier. For the first time, Gu Tingjang's expression truly changed. Who allowed you into the Chancellor's residence? Has the Chancellor not always wanted me to come back? I lifted the account book. Now I am here. Gu Tingjang looked at Gu Mingju. You brought her in? Gu Mingju stepped to my side. Yes, Kneel. Her body stiffened. In my previous life, whenever Gu Tingjang lowered his voice, she would immediately bow her head. This time she did not move. Father. Whose daughter am I really? Gu Tingjang stared at her. You are a daughter raised by the Gu family. And my biological parents? They are not important. To you, no one is important. Gu Mingju laughed, but tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. I always thought that if I was obedient enough, you would never abandon me. But you knew Madame Zhou was poisoning me, and you still did nothing. Gu Tingjang's expression shifted. Who told you that? Gu Mingju went still. So you really did know. More and more servants had gathered outside the ancestral hall. Gu Tingjang immediately ordered the gates shut. This is a family matter. Everyone leave. No one moved. Outside the courtyard came the sound of disciplined footsteps. Court of Judicial Review officers poured in. Peiji walked at the front. His face was still pale and there was a fresh stain of blood on one sleeve. The midwife at the West City Villa has confessed. Gu Tingjang looked at him. Vice Minister Pei, you lead men into the Chancellor's residence in the middle of the night. Do you have an imperial command? Peiji opened an official document. The Court of Judicial Review and the Ministry of Justice are jointly investigating the government medicine case. We have both witnesses and physical evidence. If the Chancellor objects, you may present your defense at the court. Gu Tingjang remained composed. The words of a mere midwife cannot convict this Chancellor. Of course not. Peiji looked at the account book in my hands. There are also the old Lin accounts, the Chen family transport documents, the Chancellor's own correspondence, and Madame Lin's poison testing records from that year. Gu Tingjang's eyes settled on me. In that moment he no longer looked like a father. He looked like a politician who had finally recognized the opponent standing before him. Jiwei, do you truly intend to destroy the Gu family? I am not the one who destroyed it. I handed the burned account book to an officer. You used medicine that could save lives to make profit, and innocent people died as a result. If the Gu family falls, you will be implicated as well. You are my daughter. At last he remembered blood ties again. I almost found it funny. For 16 years while I was lost outside, he had not remembered I was his daughter. After I was brought into the Chancellor's residence and suffered there, he had not remembered either. Only now, when the evidence was in my hands, did he suddenly remember our relationship. No matter what, he said, you carry Gu blood. I looked at him. When I was abandoned outside, you did not treat me as your daughter. Now that you are about to be imprisoned, you suddenly remember I am one. Blood is not a pardon you can take out only when you need it. Gu Tingjang's expression turned completely cold. Do you think Peiji can protect you for the rest of your life? I do not need him to protect me for the rest of my life, I said. I have my own business, my own evidence, and my own way forward. Even without him, I would still be standing here today. Peiji stood behind me. He did not answer on my behalf. He simply left every choice to me. At that moment, officers brought Madame Zhou into the courtyard. Her hair was disheveled, and none of her usual composure remained. When she saw Gu Mingju, she suddenly began to laugh. I raised you for 16 years, and now you help outsiders destroy the Gu family. Gu Mingju's face was pale. You raised me because I was obedient. You drugged me because you were afraid that if I had children of my own, they might threaten your son. 16 years of care cannot repay the price of an entire life. Madame Zhou tried to rush toward her, but the officers blocked her. As she was taken away, she suddenly shouted at me, "You think you won? When the Gu family falls, everyone in the capital will know that you had a vicious stepmother and a convicted father. You will never wash Gu blood out of yourself." I did not turn around. Then I will not wash it away. I was never proud of the Gu surname. Gu Tingjang, Madame Zhou, and the officials implicated in the case were taken into custody at the Court of Judicial Review. The Chen family patriarch and several Chen managers were arrested the same day. The government medicine case ultimately implicated stock and transactions across 5 prefectures. The court investigated for 3 months. DG Trading House was sealed, and the medicinal goods that had been hoarded for private profit were returned to ordinary distribution at fair prices. Gu Tingzhong was sentenced to exile. Madame Zhou was sentenced to death for poisoning Lin Wanyi, drugging Gu Mingzhu over a long period, and later attempting to silence people who knew the truth. The Chen family patriarch was also convicted. Chen Linchuan had not participated in the old crimes from 12 years earlier. But in Qinghe County he had tried to steal private medicinal stock and had helped his family transfer part of the government supply. He was barred from entering public office for life. Before leaving the capital, he sent someone to ask whether I would meet him one last time. I went, not because I still longed for him, but because I wanted to end with my own words what had never truly ended in my previous life. We met beside a road outside the city. He wore ordinary cloth clothes. There was none of the splendor of the Chen family's air around him now. He looked at me for a long time. If I had chosen you in the beginning, would the ending have been different? I was silent for a moment. You were always choosing. In my previous life and in this one. He did not understand what I meant by previous life and frowned. I continued, every time you chose power, your family and yourself, you simply never chose me. His face grew pale. I truly did like you. Maybe you did, I said, but your affection always came after your interests. I do not want that kind of affection. His eyes shifted past me. Peiji stood at a distance, waiting without approaching. Chen Linchu asked quietly, what makes him better than me? I glanced back at Peiji. He never asks me to prove that I am useful. And he never treats my choices as his accomplishments. Chen Linchuan said nothing more. I turned and left. Only after I had walked a long way did I hear the carriage behind me begin to move. The man who had trapped half my life in my previous existence finally left my life for good. Gu Mingzhu reclaimed her original surname and changed her name to Lu Mingzhu. The midwife's confession established the rest of the story. Lu Mingzhu's biological father, Lu Yuan, had been an accountant for the Lin family. After discovering the falsification of government medicinal purchases, he was pursued by Gu Tingzhong's people. Lu Yuan and his wife fled with their infant daughter. During their escape, they entrusted the child to the midwife. To keep the baby alive, the midwife exchanged her with the infant daughter of the Chancellor's residence. Lu Yuan and his wife later died while being pursued. On the day she learned the full truth, Lu Mingzhu sat in the Lin ancestral residence for an entire night. When she came out the next morning, she did not cry. She only said to me, I want a pharmacy. On what grounds? I obtained 3 secret letters for you. That was part of our cooperation. A pharmacy was not included. Her face went cold. I can buy one. You have silver? The Gu property was confiscated. I hid some jewelry of my own. I looked at her. That jewelry was part of my birth mother's dowry. Fortunately, it was not on the confiscation list. She slapped a stack of pawn receipts onto the table. Is this enough? In the end, I sold her the smallest Lin branch in the capital. She renamed it Mingsao Hall. It took in girls who had no one to depend on and taught them to identify and process medicine, keep accounts, and run a business. Lu Mingzhu and I still argued often. She complained that my medicine shelves were too low. I complained that she decorated her shop far too extravagantly. Every time she visited Wikao Hall, she claimed she was only there to discuss business, yet she always brought the capital pastries Madame Su liked most. We never became inseparable sisters. But I trusted her enough to turn my back to her. After the government medicine case ended, Peiji finally cleared his father's name. The court then ordered him to assist in reorganizing local government medicine warehouses and to establish a PUFS system for inspecting and purchasing government medicinal stock. He was busy for half a year. When he returned to Qinghe County, I was on a medicinal mountain inspecting newly planted skullcap. He stood at the bottom of the mountain path, travel-worn and dusty. Has Vice Minister Pei come to buy medicine? I asked. To collect a debt. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? The chance you promised me. I turned and continued up the mountain. That depends on your performance. He followed. How should I perform? Wikao Hall is preparing to open a branch in Lanzhou. I need someone familiar with government documents. What is the salary? Nah. He looked at me. That is rather harsh. If you do not want the work, forget it. He reached for the medicine basket on my back and carried it himself. I want it. Before we married, Peiji listed every asset under his name and handed the accounts to me. I read for about an hour, then closed the ledger. Is Vice Minister Pei afraid I will scheme for his wealth? I am afraid you will scheme only for your business. He leaned over the table to look at me, and refused to scheme for me at all. What do you have that is worth scheming for? I can audit accounts, run errands, and occasionally hold an umbrella for shopkeeper Shen. I can change my habit of fearing bitter medicine. I can also take my medicine on time even after my injuries have healed. And hiding your identity? His expression became serious. That will not happen again. I studied him for a moment and finally smiled. Then you may stay on probation. Our wedding was not held at the Chancellor's residence. It took place in front of the Shen family pharmacy. Shen Changqing and Madame Su sat in the places of honor. Beside them stood the memorial tablets of Lin Wanyi and Lin Henyan. Shopkeeper Qin arrived with old Lin family retainers from different regions. The women of Weiko Hall hung herb sashes along the entire street. Lu Mingju arrived dressed even more splendidly than the bride and was chased halfway down the street by Madame Su, who scolded her for trying to steal attention. Before the ceremony, Peiji bent close and asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I looked at the stone steps in front of the pharmacy. Many years earlier, the Chancellor's carriage had stopped in that same place. Back then, I had believed that climbing into that carriage was the road to wealth and honor. Only now did I understand. True wealth was not living in the largest residence. It was not marrying the most powerful man. It was having the right to decide what surname I would use, whom I would love, and where I would go. When I said I wanted to stay, no one could force me to leave. When I wanted to travel far away, no one could break my wings. I do not regret it. I took Peiji's hand. This time I chose for myself. 3 years later, Weika Hall had branches in 7 prefectures. Whenever disaster struck, the prices, inventories, and transport routes for common medicines were announced in advance. Women could enter pharmacies as apprentices and, after examination, become shopkeepers and pharmacists in their own right. On another spring day, a pair of magnificent official carriages stopped outside the Shen family pharmacy. Madame Su was drying herbs by the door. When she saw the insignia, she immediately called for me in alarm. I came from the rear courtyard. This time, the visitors were not from the Chancellor's residence. They were envoys sent by the imperial court. They invited me to the capital to discuss rules for civilian medicine allocation during disaster years. I glanced back. Shen Changqing sat behind the counter teaching his granddaughter how to identify herbs. Madame Su complained that the child was making a mess, but she had already slipped a piece of candy into the little girl's hand. Peiji stood beneath the veranda holding our daughter. She stretched out both arms toward me. I went over and kissed her forehead. Peiji asked, "How long will you be gone?" "I do not know. I will go with you." "What about your cases?" "I can investigate them in the capital." I laughed and passed our daughter back to him. Sunlight fell across the old signboard of the Shen family pharmacy. In my previous life, I had abandoned this place to chase what I thought was my real family. In this life, I never went to the Chancellor's residence to seek recognition, and I never went looking for the husband from my previous life. I simply stayed where I was and protected the people who truly loved me. Then, step by step, I forged a path far broader than anything I had known in my previous life. The home the Chancellor's residence never gave me, I built for myself. The freedom I never possessed in my previous life, I finally held in my own hands. And this time, no one else could decide which carriage I had to enter. Epilogue 1. Vice Minister Pei's fear of bitter medicine finally comes to light. Peiji had always believed that only I knew how much he hated bitter medicine. I had also been considerate enough to protect that secret. At least I did until the 3rd year of our marriage. He was ordered to inspect a government medicine warehouse in Nanzhou and caught a chill after being out in the rain. At first he coughed only occasionally. I asked whether he was ill. Sitting behind his desk, he calmly turned another page of an official document. No. That night he developed a fever. When I put a hand to his forehead, he still tried to open his eyes and defend himself. The room is simply warm. It is the middle of winter. The brazier is burning strongly. I glanced at the charcoal brazier which had been out for half the night. Vice Minister Pei, do you think that if you become ill enough, you will somehow be excused from drinking medicine? Peiji closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. After checking his pulse, I told Weiko Hall's new apprentice, Chunxing, to prepare the medicine. Chunxing was 13 that year. She was diligent and serious, and she idolized Peiji. In her eyes, Vice Minister Pei was majestic when he investigated cases, a hero who would not blink even if the sky fell. When the decoction was ready, she carefully carried it to the bedside. "Vice Minister Pei, your medicine is ready." Peiji opened his eyes. He looked at the girl, then at the bowl. Perhaps because he wanted to preserve his heroic dignity in front of a young admirer, he did not bargain with me the way he normally did. He calmly took the bowl. Chunxing's shone. "Master said this medicine is rather bitter." "It is nothing," Peiji answered evenly. "Only a bowl of medicine." I stood nearby and nearly laughed. He raised the bowl and took one mouthful. His throat moved with visible difficulty as he swallowed. Chunxing asked admiringly, Vice Minister Pei, is it not bitter? Not bitter. His expression did not change. I lowered my head and continued sorting the medicine chest. Today's prescription uses twice the usual amount of coptis. The hand holding his bowl paused for the smallest instant. Chunxing became even more impressed. Double coptis and Vice Minister Pei is still not afraid. Peiji looked at me, his expression was perfectly calm. If we had not been married for years, I might have missed the accusation in that look. He closed his eyes briefly, lifted the bowl again, and drank the rest in one breath. Chengxing's face flushed with excitement. Vice Minister Pei really is amazing. Peiji returned the empty bowl. You may go. Yes. Chengxing hugged the bowl to her chest and ran out. The door had barely closed when Peiji immediately held out his hand to me. I pretended not to understand. What? Shen Jiwei? Did Vice Minister Pei not just say it was not bitter? His expression did not change, and his hand remained extended. One must preserve a little dignity in front of a child. So there is no need for dignity in private? There is no need for such pretense between husband and wife. Trying not to laugh, I took a piece of candied fruit from my sleeve. He reached for it. I pulled my hand back. Answer one question first. Asked. Last night, did you secretly pour your first bowl of medicine into the flower pot? Peiji fell silent. On the windowsill sat an orchid that had previously been thriving. Every leaf was wilted today. He followed my gaze. Perhaps it is too cold. There is medicinal residue in the soil. Perhaps a servant poured it there. You were the only person in this room last night. He considered this and wisely abandoned the defense. May I have the candied fruit now? No. Why? You damaged my orchid. There is clear evidence. How much is the orchid worth? You intend to compensate me. Double. I placed the candied fruit into his palm. Deal. He ate it and his furrowed brow finally relaxed. A moment later a faint rustling came from outside the door. I walked over and pulled it open. Chunxing, Shen Cheng, Madame Sgu, and our 5-year-old daughter Pei Wenwen were all crowded outside. Chunxing stood in front with a look of complete shock. Vice Minister Pei really is afraid of bitter medicine. Peiji sat on the bed and said nothing for a very long time. Madame Su slapped her thigh. I knew it. Every time he used to take medicine, the candied fruit in the kitchen disappeared unusually quickly. Shen Chengqing suddenly understood. No wonder it vanished even when I hid it on the highest shelf of the medicine cabinet. Pei Wanyuan blinked, ran into the room, and dug through her little purse. She produced a piece of candy that had been flattened and was covered with a few crumbs. She offered it to Peiji. Father, don't be afraid. Peiji stared at the candy. The Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review had investigated countless difficult cases. At that moment, however, he seemed to face one of the hardest decisions of his life. Eat it or not. Seeing that he did not move, Pei Wanyuan encouraged him. Wanyuan already ate one. It isn't poisonous. I burst out laughing. Everyone outside the door laughed with me. In the end, Peiji accepted the candy. Thank you. Pei Wanyuan lifted her chin proudly. Father, next time you drink medicine, Wanyuan will give you candy again. From that day onward, Vice Minister Pei's fear of bitter medicine was known throughout the Shen household. Eventually, it even reached the Court of Judicial Review. It was said that whenever Peiji became ill, court officials began sending a small box of candied fruit, along with the official files they sent him. Peiji investigated the leak for 3 full months and never discovered who had spread the story first. Naturally, I never told him that Lu Mingju had been the first person to write it into the court's unofficial gossip notes. She had even ordered 20 copies made. Epilogue 2, which is the capital's #1 pharmacy, Mingsao Hall or Wikao Hall. After Lu Mingju took over her capital branch, the first thing she did was not count the medicinal stock. She redecorated. She disliked the old Lin family wooden sign and ordered a gilded plaque. She thought the medicine cabinets were too dark and replaced them all with fine pearwood. Even the paper used to wrap medicine was printed with a faint gold peony pattern. The first time I entered Mingsao Hall, I stood at the door in silence for a long time. Lu Mingju sat behind the brand new counter in a gold-woven dress. Well, it looks like jewelry shop. Half her smile disappeared. Do you understand what style is? Patients are buying medicine, not style. That is why your Waikao Hall always looks dusty and plain. She picked up a packet printed with peonies. See this? Customers can carry it out and feel proud to be seen with it. I opened the packet and examined the wrapping. The paper costs more than the licorice inside. That is called value. That is called waste. We argued for 2 hours and convinced no one. 3 months later, the capital's Pharmacy Merchants Association held its annual ranking. Dozens of pharmacies would compete for the title of best pharmacy in the capital. Lu Mingju began preparing a month in advance. She had the Mingsao Hall sign repainted and gave all her female employees matching pale purple work dresses. On the day of the judging, she even hired a pair of musicians to perform outside the entrance. When I heard, I asked only one question. How much did she spend? Shopkeeper Chin answered in a low voice, more than 300 taels. I nearly crushed the teacup in my hand. I had not intended to enter the competition. Lu Mingju personally sent me a challenge letter. It contained only 8 large characters. Wekao Hall, do you dare compete? Madame Su read it and immediately rolled up her sleeves. Why wouldn't we go? Other than having a shinier door and more expensive wrapping paper, what does her pharmacy have that ours doesn't? I tried to explain that such an empty title had little practical use. Madame Su was already organizing the women. She even polished Wekao Hall's 5-year-old wooden sign 3 times. Mother, I thought you disliked this sort of competition. We can argue among ourselves with the doors shut, she said with a snort. But if outsiders are choosing number 1, I will not hand it to that peacock for free. The ranking had 3 categories: medicinal quality, processing skill, and shop management. Wekao Hall and Mingkal tied in the first category. Wekao Hall won the second by a small margin. For the third category, several association elders stood inside Mingkao Hall and nodded repeatedly at the bright, clean shop, the clearly organized medicine cabinets, and the neatly presented female workers. Then they came to Wekao Hall. The sign was old, the counter was old. In one corner, an elderly farmer was crouched with a chicken in his arms, asking for advice. One elder frowned. How can a pharmacy allow livestock inside? Madame Su immediately explained. His chicken ate the wrong herb. He cannot bear to spend money seeing a doctor for himself, so he came to ask whether the chicken can be treated first. The elder frowned even harder. This is hardly proper. I was about to take the farmer into the rear courtyard when Lu Mingju walked out from the crowd. She was dressed more brightly than her own signboard. What exactly is improper about it? The elder froze. Shopkeeper Lu, Wekao Hall is your competitor. She looked at the chicken in the old farmer's arms. A pharmacy is a place to treat illness and help people. Poor people, rich people, even a chicken. If there is a need, what is wrong with letting someone come in and ask a question? I raised an eyebrow at her. She pretended not to notice. The elder looked embarrassed. But shop management also includes the environment. Mingzhou Hall is clean because we clean it every day, Lu Mingju said. Wekao Hall is crowded because they do not drive away people who cannot afford a consultation. Those two things do not contradict each other. I leaned closer. Why are you speaking for me today? In a voice only I could hear, she replied. If I win, I want to win fairly. In the end, the Merchants Association announced that Mingkao Hall and Wekao Hall were tied for first place. Lu Mingju objected on the spot. How can there be 2 number 1 pharmacies? The elders looked at one another. Each shop has its strengths. It is difficult to distinguish between them. Then we compete once more, I asked. In what? She looked across the street. An elderly woman holding a prescription was hesitating between the 2 pharmacies. Lu Mingju lifted her chin. Whoever gets that customer through the door first. The moment she finished speaking, she put on her gentlest smile. Madam, all medicine Mensa Hall is 10% off today, and we include a beautiful medicine box. I stepped forward too. Wekao Hall does not give away a box, but the same prescription will cost 6 copper coins less. The old woman looked at Mingzhou Hall's splendid entrance, then at Wekao Hall's ordinary wooden sign. Finally, she walked toward Wekao Hall. Lu Mingju's expression darkened, but the old woman stopped at the doorway and turned back to her. Young lady, can I buy your boxes separately? My granddaughter is getting married next month. They would be perfect for storing jewelry. Everyone nearby burst into laughter. Lu Mingju was silent for a moment, then turned to her workers. Bring 10 boxes. She gave them to the woman. A gift. The old woman beamed. Shopkeeper Lu is truly generous. She took the boxes and promptly turned around to buy her medicine from Wekao Hall. Lu Mingju stood in place while her expression changed several times. I went over and patted her shoulder. At least you gained a good reputation. She gritted her teeth. Shen Jiwei, starting tomorrow, every common medicine at Mingzhou Hall will be 7 copper coins cheaper. You will lose money. I can make money from other medicines. No. You will disrupt the market price. Afraid of losing? I am afraid you will not be able to pay your workers at the end of the month. We argued all the way back to Mingzhou Hall. 3 days later, a new saying spread through the capital. Mingzhou Hall was for appearances. Wekao Hall was for affordability. If you were arranging a marriage proposal, go to Mingzhou Hall for a beautiful gift box. If you were actually sick, go to Wekao Hall for medicine. When Lu Mingju heard the rumor, she did not leave her residence for 2 full days. On the 3rd day, she had 500 unused medicine boxes delivered to Wekao Hall with a note. These won't sell. Consider them my reward to you. I had the boxes converted into tool cases for our female pharmacy workers. They were unexpectedly useful. When Lu Mingju heard what I had done, she was silent for a very long time. Then she ordered another 500 boxes. Epilogue 3. The first time my daughter ran away from home. When Pei Yuanyuan was 6, she ran away from home for the first time. It began because she wanted to keep a goose. Shen Changqing had brought the goose back from the countryside after a medicine-buying trip. It was completely white, with a long neck and an exceptionally bad temper. On its first day at the pharmacy, it chased Peiji halfway down the street, pecking at him as he retreated. Peiji was, after all, the dignified vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review. He could hardly argue with a goose in front of everyone, so he could only protect the official documents in his arms while retreating. Pei Yuanyuan stood in the pharmacy doorway clapping and laughing. "Father, run faster!" In the end, Madame Su caught the goose by the neck and locked it in the rear courtyard. Peiji straightened his badly pecked sleeve and calmly announced, "It will be sent away tomorrow." Pei Yuanyuan immediately stopped laughing. She hugged the bamboo cage. "No, it hurts people. It only pecks, father." Peiji fell silent. Madame Su turned her back, her shoulders shaking. I was struggling not to laugh too. Pei Yuanyuan explained very seriously, "Father always wears black. Maybe the goose thinks he is a giant bug." "I will change clothes tomorrow," Peiji said. Her eyes brightened. "Then it doesn't have to go? I will change clothes and send the goose away." Pei Yuanyuan began to cry on the spot. She did not wail like many children. She simply held the cage while large tears fell one after another. "Yuanyuan will teach it. Xiaobai won't peck people anymore." Peiji crouched and patiently reasoned with her. Today it tore the trousers of 2 workers and knocked over 3 baskets of medicinal herbs. If it stays here, it will interfere with the pharmacy's business. Pei Yuanyuan sniffed. "Xiaobai can pay for it." "With what?" She thought for a long time. "Eggs. Male geese do not lay eggs." Her crying stopped. She stared at the bamboo cage in shock. "Xiaobai is a boy?" "Yes." She stared at the goose as if she had just experienced the first betrayal of her life. After a long while, however, she remained firm. "A boy goose can still live here." Peiji did not agree. The next morning the bamboo cage was empty. Pei Yuanyuan was gone too. On the table she had left a letter containing 1 crooked line of writing. "I took Xiaobai away. Don't look for me." Peiji read it and his face changed instantly. I had never seen him so nervous, not even when the court was searching for fugitives. "Seal." I grabbed his arm. "A 6-year-old child does not require the city gates to be sealed. She has a goose with her, which means she cannot have gone far." We split up. Shen Changqing checked footprints in the rear courtyard. Madame Su questioned the neighbors. Peiji took several officers and searched along the streets. I went into Yuanyuan's room and carefully checked what was missing. Her small bundle was gone. 3 pieces of cake were gone. Her favorite red cloak was gone. Under the table, however, lay a small tuft of muddy white feathers. Mixed into the mud were tiny fragments of medicinal residue of the kind used only in the drying yard of Wiko Hall's southern branch. When I reached the southern branch, I heard chaos before I even entered. In the rear courtyard, more than a dozen female workers were lined against the wall. The big white goose stood in the middle with its head held high. Pei Yuanyuan sat on a wooden crate, negotiating seriously with the shopkeeper. "Xiaobai can guard the door. He's better than a dog." The shopkeeper did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Little boss, Xiaobai has already chased away every delivery worker. He can chase away bad people too. The delivery workers are not bad people, but Xiaobai doesn't know that." I stood the gate. "So you brought the goose here after running away from home?" Pei Yuanyuan's entire body stiffened. She slowly turned around. "Mother, did your letter not say we should not look for you?" She lowered her head guiltily. "Yuanyuan was afraid you would worry, so I came to our own branch." "Then why leave the letter?" "Father taught me that when I go out, I have to leave a message." For a moment I could not argue with that logic. The big white goose saw me and rushed forward, flapping its wings. Before I could move, Pei Yuanyuan jumped down from the crate. "Xiaobai, you may not peck, mother." Amazingly, the goose stopped. It tilted its head at me, then turned and pecked the boot of a court officer standing nearby. Peiji arrived with his men at that exact moment. The instant he saw that his daughter was unharmed, the tension visibly left him. Then the goose charged him again. Peiji stood still this time. Pei Yuanyuan immediately spread both arms in front of her father. "Xiaobai, this is father. You cannot peck him." The goose stopped in front of her and let out a dissatisfied honk. Pei Yuanyuan turned and hugged Peiji's leg. "Father, I was wrong." Peiji crouched down and first checked her carefully to make sure she was not hurt. Only after confirming she was fine did he ask, "What did you do wrong?" "I shouldn't have run away from home." "What else?" "I shouldn't have brought only 3 pieces of cake." Peiji closed his eyes briefly. "That is not what I meant," she thought again. "I shouldn't have let Xiaobai peck the delivery workers. And I shouldn't have written don't look for me. Peiji's expression finally softened. Why? Because father and mother would worry. She put her little arms around his neck. Wanwen won't run away again. Peiji lifted her into his arms. Xiaobai still has to be sent away. Her face collapsed at once. I looked at the big white goose in the middle of the courtyard. It had already successfully frightened away 3 strangers. Not necessarily. Peiji turned to me. It can guard the warehouse. Waikao Hall's medicinal storehouses sometimes have mice and occasionally thieves. An ordinary guard dog wags its tail at familiar people. This goose treats everyone equally. It pecks them all. In the end, the big white goose was allowed to remain at the southern branch and formally became Waikao Hall's first warehouse guard goose. Pei Wenyuan named him Pei Xiaobai. Peiji objected strongly. Why does a goose have my surname? Pei Wenyuan answered as if it were obvious. Because Xiaobai likes father the most. I looked at the torn corner of Peiji's robe. That certainly shows. From then on, the southern branch never lost another packet of medicine. There was only one inconvenience. Whenever Peiji went there to inspect the branch, someone had to lock Pei Xiaobai away in advance. Later, Pei Wenyuan raised a female goose as well. The following spring, 6 goslings appeared in the rear courtyard. She picked one up and ran excitedly to find Peiji. Father, Xiaobai laid eggs. Peiji stared at her in silence for a long time. At last he corrected only one point. He did not lay them. Pei Wenyuan blinked, but Xiaobai became a father. Yes, father is a father too. Yes, so father and Xiaobai the same. Peiji fell silent again. I sat nearby laughing so hard that I could not drink my tea. The dignified vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review had in the end lost to a goose.